Ethan Cole stood outside the rundown lakeside cafe, heart pounding. He knew he shouldn't be here. After his devastating divorce 3 years ago, he'd sworn never to let anyone close enough to hurt him again. But then that stranger walked in, late, exhausted, and clearly not wanting to be there either, and everything he thought he knew about love began to crack. This is a story about daring to risk it all when you thought you'd already lost your only chance. Stay until the end, hit like and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The nail gun jammed again. Ethan Cole set it down harder than necessary on the workbench, the metallic clang echoing through the empty workshop. Sawdust hung in the afternoon light, slanting through the windows, turning the air golden and thick. He'd been working on the same cabinet for 3 days now, a custom piece for a client who wanted something rustic but elegant, whatever the hell that meant. Normally he could lose himself in the work, let the smell of fresh-cut pine and the rhythm of his hands drown out everything else. But today his mind kept drifting, and that pissed him off. "Dad?" Ethan turned. His son stood in the doorway, backpack still slung over one shoulder, dark hair sticking up in the back where he'd been lying on it during the car ride home from school. 7 years old and already too observant for his own good. "Hey, buddy, how was school?" "Fine." Mason dropped his backpack and wandered over to the workbench, running his fingers along the smooth edge of the cabinet door. "Mrs. Patterson said I did good on my spelling test." "Did well," Ethan corrected automatically. "Did well." Mason looked up at him, and Ethan saw something calculating in those dark eyes, too much like his mother's eyes. "Uncle Ben called." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yeah?" "He said you're supposed to call him back. He said it's important." Mason paused, still looking at him with that unnerving intensity. "Are you going to go on a date?" There it was. Ethan picked up a piece of sandpaper and ran it along the cabinet edge, not looking at his son. "Uncle Ben talks too much. He said you need to meet someone nice. He said you're lonely." "I'm not lonely. I've got you, don't I?" Mason frowned, a crease forming between his eyebrows that made him look older than 7. "That's different." "How's it different?" "Because—" Mason shrugged, struggling with words too big for him. "You're supposed to have someone. Like Jamie's dad has Miss Rodriguez now. They go to movies and stuff." Ethan set down the sandpaper. He should have seen this coming. Ben had been pushing for months now, ever since Ethan's ex-wife Vanessa remarried and moved to Portland with her new husband. Ever since the divorce became not just final but ancient history, something that happened to someone else in another lifetime. 3 years was long enough, Ben kept saying. You can't hide forever. Except Ethan wasn't hiding. He was surviving. There was a difference. "Listen," he said, crouching down to Mason's level. "Uncle Ben means well, but he doesn't understand. What your mom and I had, when that ends, it takes something out of you. You understand?" Mason shook his head. "Not really." "Someday you will." Ethan ruffled his hair, forcing a smile. "Now go wash up for dinner. I'm making spaghetti." "Can I have garlic bread?" "You can have whatever you want, bud." Mason grinned and took off running, his footsteps thundering up the stairs. Ethan stayed crouched there for a moment, staring at the sawdust on the concrete floor. The workshop suddenly felt too quiet, too empty. He stood up and grabbed his phone from the workbench. Ben answered on the second ring. "Finally! I thought you were going to ghost me." "I'm not going on a blind date, Ben." "You don't even know what I'm going to say." "Yes, I do. You're going to tell me about some friend of Sarah's who's recently single and really nice, and I should just give it a shot because what's the worst that could happen?" Ethan walked to the window, looking out at the yard where Mason's bike lay on its side in the grass. "The answer's no." "Her name's Lena," Ben said, ignoring him completely. "She's a graphic designer, divorced, no kids. Sarah met her at some art gallery thing. She's smart, she's funny, and she's just as skeptical about this whole setup as you are." "Then why is she doing it?" "Because her friends won't leave her alone either." Ben's voice softened. "Look, man, I'm not saying you need to fall in love. I'm saying you need to remember how to talk to another adult who isn't me or your clients. Just coffee, 1 hour. If it's terrible, you never have to do it again, and I'll stop bugging you." Ethan closed his eyes. He could hear Mason upstairs singing something off-key while the water ran. The house smelled like sawdust and the ghost of this morning's burnt toast. Outside, the October wind was picking up, rattling the window frames. 1 hour, he heard himself say. Yes! Ben's triumph was immediate and loud. Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock. There's that cafe by the lake, the one with the... I know the one. Ethan, seriously, thank you. You won't regret this. Ethan hung up without answering because he was pretty sure he already did. Saturday arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. Ethan stood in front of his closet for 20 minutes, feeling ridiculous. It was just coffee. It didn't matter what he wore. Except Mason was sitting on the bed behind him, swinging his legs and watching with the focus of a television critic. The blue one, Mason said. I wasn't asking for fashion advice. The blue one looks nice. Mom always said you looked good in blue. Ethan's hand stilled on a gray Henley. He pulled out the blue shirt instead, hating himself a little. Your mom said a lot of things. Are you nervous? No? Uncle Ben says everybody gets nervous on dates. Uncle Ben needs to learn when to shut up. Ethan pulled on the blue shirt and checked himself in the mirror. He looked tired. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper in the gray afternoon light. 32 going on 50. How do I look? Good. Mason hopped off the bed. You should bring flowers. I'm not bringing flowers. Why not? Because it's not that kind of date. Ethan grabbed his wallet and keys, then hesitated. You're going to be okay here with Grandma, right? She's going to make me help with her puzzle, the one with 1,000 pieces of just sky. Mason made a face. But yeah, I'll be okay. Downstairs, Ethan's mother was already setting up at the kitchen table, puzzle pieces spread across yesterday's newspaper. She looked up when Ethan came in, and her face did something complicated. Surprise, pleasure, worry, all at once. Well, she said, look at you. Don't start, Ma. I didn't say anything. You were thinking it loud. She smiled, the skin crinkling at the corners of her eyes. Ellen Cole had been beautiful once. You could still see it in her bone structure, the way she carried herself. Widowed 10 years now, she'd never even looked at another man. Ethan used to think that was noble. Lately, he just thought it was sad. I'm glad you're doing this, she said quietly. Your father would have wanted... Ma. His voice came out rougher than he intended. Please. She nodded, went back to sorting puzzle pieces. Mason appeared at Ethan's elbow, holding something out. A small wooden figure, carved in the shape of a bird. One of Ethan's early pieces, from before Mason was born, when he still made things just to make them. For good luck, Mason said. Ethan took it, feeling the smooth grain against his palm. Thanks, bud. The drive to the lake took 15 minutes. Ethan spent the entire time trying to remember how to make conversation with a stranger. What did people even talk about on first dates? Work? No, too boring. Family? Too complicated. Hobbies? He made furniture and occasionally watched football. That was it. Jesus, when had his life become so small? The cafe sat right on the water, a converted boathouse with peeling blue paint and windows that rattled when the wind picked up. Ethan had been here exactly once before, years ago, with Vanessa. They'd gotten coffee and watched the boats come in, and she'd told him she was pregnant, best day of his life, followed 3 years later by the worst. He parked and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Through the cafe windows, he could see a handful of people scattered at tables, an older couple reading newspapers, a woman with a laptop, college kids laughing over something on a phone, normal people doing normal things. He could do this. It was just an hour. The door chimed when he walked in. The place smelled like coffee and old wood and something baking. A girl behind the counter looked up, started to smile, then went back to her phone. Ethan checked his watch, 2:58. He was early. Great. Now he'd look eager. He ordered coffee, black, nothing fancy, and chose a table by the window. Watched the lake. Gray water under grayer sky, choppy with wind. A few brave ducks paddled near the shore. His coffee tasted burnt. 3 o'clock came and went. Ethan pulled out his phone, checked for messages. Nothing. He should have known. This whole thing was stupid from the start. He'd give it until 3:15, then he was gone. He'd done his part. He could tell Ben he tried. 3:15. 3:20. The college kids left, laughing their way out the door. The woman with the laptop ordered another drink. Ethan stared at his coffee and felt the familiar weight settling back over him, the one that said this was exactly what he deserved. Alone at a table, waiting for someone who wasn't coming. The door chimed again at 3:23. She came in like a storm, dark hair windblown and eyes scanning the room with something close to panic. Jeans and a gray jacket, a bag slung over one shoulder, no makeup that he could see. She spotted him. He must have looked as awkward as he felt, alone at a table with an empty chair across from him, and her expression shifted to something like resignation. She walked over. Ethan? Yeah. He started to stand, then wasn't sure if he should, ended up doing an awkward half-rise. Lena? I'm late. I'm sorry. My car. There was this whole thing with... She stopped, took a breath. I'm just late. Sorry. It's fine. It's not fine. It's rude. She dropped into the chair across from him, setting her bag on the floor. Up close, she looked tired, like she'd had about as much sleep as he had, maybe less. I almost didn't come. The honesty of it surprised him. Yeah? I was sitting in my car for like 10 minutes, trying to talk myself into it. She met his eyes, and hers were hazel, more green than brown. This is weird, right? This whole thing is weird. Extremely weird. Something in her face relaxed. Okay, good. I thought maybe I was just being a baby about it. The girl from behind the counter appeared at their table. What can I get you? Lena ordered coffee, also black, and the girl wandered off. An awkward silence settled over the table. Ethan tried to remember any of the conversation starters he'd rehearsed in the car. They'd all evaporated. So, Lena said finally, how do we do this? Do we just jump into the interrogation questions? Favorite color? Biggest fear? What's your relationship with your mother? My mother's great. Bit of a worrier, but great. Lucky you. Mine thinks I'm a constant disappointment. She said it lightly, but something hard flickered underneath. Divorced at 34, no kids, living alone. I'm basically her nightmare. Divorced at 29, one kid, living with my mom because my ex got the house. Ethan shrugged. Pretty sure I'm winning the nightmare competition. You live with your mom? She lives with me. Technically, it's my house. She just moved in after my dad died. Helps with Mason. That's my son. Lena's coffee arrived. She wrapped her hands around the mug like she was trying to absorb the warmth. How old? 7. He's the one who told me I should bring you flowers. You didn't bring flowers. I didn't want to seem... Ethan gestured vaguely. You know. Desperate? She smiled slightly. I appreciate that. You're welcome. They sat there drinking coffee, watching each other across the table. The wind rattled the windows. Someone in the kitchen dropped something with a crash, followed by swearing. Lena's smile widened. This is the worst first date I've ever been on, she said. Same. And I once had a guy spend the entire meal talking about his fantasy football league. I once had a woman spend an hour explaining why astrology is more real than psychology. Lena laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of her. It changed her whole face, made her look younger, less guarded. Okay, you win. What do I win? I don't know, bragging rights? She leaned back in her chair, studying him. Can I ask you something real? Sure. Oh, why'd you agree to this? And don't say because your friend wouldn't shut up about it. I want the actual reason. Ethan turned his coffee mug in his hands, watching the liquid swirl. Nobody had asked him that. Not Ben, not his mother, not even Mason in his own roundabout way. They'd all just assumed he was ready, or should be ready, or needed to be ready. Nobody asked if he actually was. My son, he said finally. Mason. He's been, I don't know, worried about me, I guess, in the way kids do when they don't have the words for it. And I realized I've been showing him how to be afraid, how to shut down and play it safe and never risk anything. That's not... He stopped, surprised by how much he'd said. That's not what I want to teach him. Lena was quiet for a moment, then... My best friend told me I was turning into a ghost. Said I was so busy protecting myself that I forgot how to actually live. She looked out the window at the lake. She wasn't wrong. So we're both here out of guilt. And fear. And friends who won't mind their own business. Mostly that. She turned back to him. You want to get out of here? Ethan blinked. What? This place is depressing. The coffee's terrible. It smells like wet dog, and those ducks outside look like they're plotting something. She stood up, grabbing her bag. There's a diner about 2 miles from here. Food's greasy, coffee's worse, but at least it's honest about what it is. I thought we were doing coffee. We did coffee. It sucked. Now let's do something that sucks less. She paused, and something vulnerable flickered across her face. Unless you want to call it. I'd understand. Ethan looked at her, really looked. Wind-blown hair, tired eyes, walls built so high she probably couldn't see over them herself. Running late and running scared and still standing there offering him an out if he wanted it. He stood up. I'll drive. What's up? The diner was called Sal's, and it looked like it hadn't been updated since 1987. Red vinyl booths with duct tape patches, a jukebox that probably didn't work, fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered. The smell of fryer grease hit them the moment they walked in. Perfect, Lena said. They slid into a booth near the back. A waitress appeared immediately. Older woman, name tag that said Deb. A look that said she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. Coffee? Deb asked. Please, Lena said. Make it 2, Ethan added. Deb poured from a pot that looked like it had been brewing since morning, then wandered off without asking if they wanted menus. Lena took a sip and made a face. That's legitimately awful. You picked the place. I know. I'm committed to my choices. She set down her mug. So, carpenter, right? That's what Sarah said. Furniture, mostly. Custom pieces, repairs, whatever people need. Ethan wrapped his hands around his own mug. The coffee was terrible, but at least it was hot. You do graphic design? Freelance, mostly branding work, some illustration. Pays the bills, barely. She traced a finger along a crack in the vinyl seat. I used to want to be a real artist, like gallery shows and everything. Stupid kid dreams. What changed? Got married, needed stable income. Turns out stable income and artistic dreams don't really coexist. She said it matter-of-factly, but Ethan heard the loss underneath. What about you? You always want to work with wood. My dad was a carpenter, learned from him. Ethan stared into his coffee. He died when I was 22, heart attack at a job site. Just gone. I'm sorry. It was 10 years ago. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. No, it didn't. Ethan looked up at her, surprised again. Most people got awkward when he mentioned his father, changed the subject as fast as possible. Lena just sat there, eyes steady, like loss was something she understood. Deb reappeared. You two eating or just camping out? Lena glanced at Ethan, eyebrow raised. He shrugged. Burger, fries. Same, Lena said. Deb grunted and left. The jukebox in the corner suddenly crackled to life, playing something old and scratchy that might have been Elvis. Neither of them had touched it. Haunted diner, Lena said. Even better. You believe in ghosts? I believe in things that stick around when they're not wanted. She tilted her head, studying him. How long were you married? 5 years. Together for 7. The answer came automatically, like a fact he'd memorized. You? 8 years total. Married for 6. She paused. He was my college boyfriend. We did that thing where you graduate and everyone else is getting married, so you just follow along. Like it's the next assignment. What happened? He wanted someone quieter, more agreeable, less likely to argue when he made decisions without me. Lena's voice stayed even, but her hands tightened around her mug. Took me way too long to realize he wasn't looking for a partner. He was looking for a prop. Ethan recognized that tone. The one that meant you'd spent years explaining yourself in your own head until the words came out smooth and practiced. He'd done the same thing after Vanessa left. Mine wanted excitement, he said. Adventure. Someone who'd quit his job and backpack through Europe or whatever. I was too steady, too boring, too happy just staying put. He stared at the table. Funny thing is, I didn't feel happy. I felt safe. Turns out that's not the same thing. No, Lena said quietly. It's really not. The food arrived. Burgers that were probably frozen yesterday, fries that glistened with grease. It looked perfect. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that didn't need filling. The diner was mostly empty, except for a guy at the counter, reading a newspaper and a young couple in the corner booth who couldn't stop touching each other. Lena watched them for a moment, something wistful crossing her face. Think they'll make it? What? Those two. Think they'll beat the odds? Ethan looked. The guy was feeding the girl a French fry, and she was laughing, and they both looked so goddamn certain that nothing bad could ever touch them. He remembered feeling like that once, 1,000,000 years ago. Probably not, he said. Wow, dark. You asked. I did. She took another bite of her burger, ketchup smearing at the corner of her mouth. She wiped it away with a napkin. Can I ask you something else? Do you actually want to be here? Right now, I mean. Not the philosophical here like existing on Earth, just here with me, in this terrible diner. Ethan set down his burger. It was a dangerous question, the kind that required an honest answer. He could feel the walls going up, the instinct to deflect and protect. But Lena was looking at him with those hazel eyes, and she looked just as scared as he felt, and something in him decided to jump. Yeah, he said. I do. Her shoulders dropped, tension releasing. Good. Me too. You sound surprised. I am. I figured I'd hate this. Hate you, probably. Nothing personal, just that's where I'm at with most things. She pushed a fry around her plate. My therapist says I have trust issues. You see a therapist? Twice a month. You? Tried it once. Couldn't get past the feeling that I was paying someone to listen to me complain. That's literally the job description. I know, still felt weird. Lena smiled. I get that. Took me 6 months to stop apologizing every time I cried in session. You still do it? The therapy thing? Yeah. Turns out unlearning 8 years of someone telling you you're the problem takes a while. She met his eyes. What about you? How'd you unlearn your stuff? I didn't. I just got really good at building furniture and not thinking about it. Ah, the healthy approach. Hey, it works. Does it? The question hung there. Ethan thought about his workshop, the hours he spent alone with sawdust and silence. Thought about Mason asking if he was lonely, his mother's careful, worried looks, Ben's endless pushing. The truth was, it didn't work. It just made the days pass. No, he admitted. Not really. Points for honesty. Lena finished her coffee, grimacing at the taste. You know what's weird? I feel like I've known you longer than an hour. Same. Is that normal for dates? I don't know. I haven't been on one in over 3 years. 4 for me. She leaned back against the booth. So we're both just winging it. Seems like it. Outside, the gray afternoon was turning into gray evening. The diner's lights reflected in the windows, making the world beyond look fuzzy and distant. Deb came by with the coffee pot, refilling their mugs without asking. The couple in the corner booth finally left, still wrapped up in each other. Tell me about your son, Lena said. So Ethan did. He told her about Mason's obsession with dinosaurs last year, how he'd insisted on being a paleontologist for Halloween, about the way he hummed when he was concentrating, how he still slept with a stuffed elephant named Dr. Trunk, how he asked questions that didn't have easy answers and looked at Ethan like he hung the moon, even though Ethan was pretty sure he was screwing up the parenting thing on a daily basis. He sounds great, Lena said when he finished. He is. He's the only thing I got right. I doubt that's true. You haven't seen my track record. Neither have you seen mine. She traced patterns in the condensation on her water glass. I always wanted kids. My ex didn't. Every time I brought it up, he'd say someday or when things settle down or whatever excuse came to mind. Then I found out he'd gotten a vasectomy without telling me. Jesus. Yep. Her voice stayed calm, but her jaw tightened. That's when I filed, not because of the vasectomy itself, but because he made that choice for both of us and didn't think I deserved to know. How long ago? Divorce finalized a year ago. We separated 2 years before that. She looked up at him. Does it get easier, the being alone part? Ethan thought about his empty house, the quiet evenings after Mason went to bed, the way he'd stopped buying groceries for 2 without even realizing it. You get used to it. That's not the same as easier, but it's something. That's what I'm afraid of, getting so used to it that I forget there's another option. Is that why you agreed to this? The date? Lena was quiet for a moment. Then, my friend Claire, the one who called me a ghost, She said something that stuck. She said fear is just a habit, and habits can be broken. She smiled slightly. Sounded like therapy bullshit when she said it, but maybe she had a point. Maybe.
What about you? Your son being worried, that's part of it. But what's the rest? Nobody had asked him that either. Ethan looked at this woman across from him, this stranger, who somehow wasn't a stranger anymore, and found himself wanting to tell the truth. I'm tired, he said, of being angry at my ex-wife for leaving, of being angry at myself for not being enough to make her stay, of waking up every day and pretending I'm fine when I'm just going through the motions. So he picked at a crack in the table. Mason asked me yesterday if I was lonely, and the worst part is I lied and said no. But yeah, I'm lonely as hell. Lena reached across the table. For a second, Ethan thought she was going to take his hand, but she just pushed the ketchup bottle toward him, a small gesture that somehow felt bigger. Me too, she said. They sat there as the diner filled up with the dinner crowd. Families, couples, a group of teenagers, loud and careless. Deb brought them pie they didn't order, mumbling something about it being old and needing to clear inventory. It was apple, and it was actually pretty good. Can I tell you something embarrassing? Lena asked, halfway through her slice. Please. I practiced what I was going to say to you, like, actually rehearsed in front of my mirror. She laughed. I had talking points prepared. Hobbies, career goals, favorite books, the whole thing. How many did you get through? Exactly 0. Same here. I had a whole thing about sustainable wood sourcing. Sexy. I thought so. She grinned, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest, a loosening, like a knot coming undone. When was the last time someone had made him laugh? Actually laugh, not the polite chuckle he gave clients, or the automatic smile he used with Mason when he was too tired to mean it. What would you have said, he asked, if you'd used your talking points? Probably something boring about kerning and font psychology. You? Definitely the wood sourcing thing, maybe some stuff about joinery techniques. We would have put each other to sleep. Absolutely. Lena set down her fork, pie half finished. This is better. The honest stuff, the messy stuff. I like this better. Yeah, Ethan said. Me too. The diner door chimed as more people came in, bringing cold air with them. Ethan glanced at his watch and was shocked to see it was past 6. 3 hours. They'd been here 3 hours, and it felt like 20 minutes. I should go, he said, not moving. Mason's probably driving my mom crazy by now. And I've got a project deadline Monday that I've been avoiding. Lena didn't move either. But this was nice. It was. They looked at each other across the table, and Ethan felt the weight of the moment, the choice sitting there between them. They could leave it here. Nice evening, good conversation, proof that they were both capable of human connection. Safe. Simple. No risk. Or, would you want to do this again? The words came out before he could stop them. Lena's eyes widened slightly. Yeah, I would. Really? Don't sound so shocked. I'm not shocked, I'm just... Ethan ran a hand through his hair. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm out of practice with all of this. So am I. We can figure it out together. She pulled out her phone. Give me your number, before we both chicken out. They exchanged numbers, fingers fumbling with screens. Ethan's hands were shaking slightly, and he couldn't tell if it was nerves or something else. Something that felt suspiciously like hope. Outside, the parking lot was mostly full now. The temperature had dropped, and Ethan's breath misted in the air. Lena pulled her jacket tighter, and they stood there by his truck, neither one ready to leave yet. Thank you, she said, for not being as terrible as I expected. Wow, high praise. I mean it. I was ready to hate this, hate you, go home and tell Claire she was wrong and I was right, and I never needed to leave my apartment again. She looked up at him, and in the parking lot lights her eyes looked more green than brown. But you're real. And I forgot what that felt like. Ethan's throat tightened. You too. So we'll talk? Like, actually talk? Not just say we will and then ghost each other? We'll talk. Promise? Promise. Lena smiled, small and uncertain and genuine. Then she got into her car, a beat-up Honda that looked like it had seen better days, and drove away. Ethan stood there watching her taillights disappear, feeling the cold seep through his jacket, feeling the weight of his phone in his pocket with her number in it.
The drive home passed in a blur. His mind kept replaying the evening, her laugh, the way she'd admitted her fears so easily, the moment she'd said me, too. When he pulled into his driveway, the house was lit up, warm light spilling from the windows. He could see shadows moving inside. His family. His life. Mason met him at the door, still in his pajamas, even though it wasn't quite bedtime. How was it? Ethan hung up his jacket. It was good. Did you like her? Yeah, bud, I did. Are you going to see her again? I think so. Mason grinned, the kind of full-face smile that reminded Ethan why he was doing any of this in the first place. Cool. His mother appeared in the kitchen doorway, puzzle dust on her hands, hope written across her face in a way she tried to hide. Good evening? Good evening, Ma. I'm glad, honey. She went back to her puzzle. Mason tugged at Ethan's sleeve. Come see what Grandma and I built. It's all clouds so far, but she says the sky's the hardest part. Ethan let himself be pulled into the kitchen, where 1,000 pieces of blue-gray cardboard covered the table. He sat down and helped them fit pieces together, listening to Mason chatter about school and dinosaurs, and how Jamie's dad was taking him to a real excavation site next month. Later, after Mason was in bed and his mother had retired to the guest room she'd taken over years ago, Ethan stood in his workshop in the dark. The cabinet sat where he'd left it, still unfinished, still waiting. He ran his hand along the smooth wood, feeling the grain beneath his palm. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Made it home. Thanks for not being a serial killer. Ethan smiled and saved her contact. Typed back, same to you. The bar was low, but you cleared it. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I'll try to contain my pride. He hesitated, then wrote, next time we should pick a place with better coffee. The response came quickly. Next time? Yeah, if you want. A longer pause this time. Then, I want. Ethan set down his phone and looked around his workshop, at the half-finished projects, the tools his father had handed down, the sawdust that never quite disappeared no matter how much he swept. This was his kingdom, his refuge, the place where he came to hide from everything complicated and messy and real. But standing there in the dark, he thought about hazel eyes and honest answers and someone saying me too. Thought about Mason's grin and his mother's quiet hope. Thought about the difference between being safe and being happy. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. The cabinet could wait another day. The second date happened 4 days later, on a Wednesday evening that felt too ordinary for something that made Ethan's stomach tight with nerves. They'd texted back and forth in the days between. Nothing heavy, just small exchanges that felt bigger than they were. Lena sent him a photo of a particularly hideous logo she'd been asked to fix. He sent her a picture of Mason's latest drawing, a dinosaur eating what appeared to be a building. She wrote back, future architect or future disaster movie director? Both probably, he'd replied. They met at a different place this time, a small Italian restaurant that wasn't trying too hard. Lena was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table with a glass of red wine, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when he approached, and something in her face relaxed. You came, she said. Did you think I wouldn't? I had about a 60-40 confidence level. Ethan sat down across from her. Which way? Started at 40, moved up to 60 when you didn't cancel this morning. A waiter appeared, young guy with gelled hair and an Italian name tag that probably wasn't real. Ethan ordered water, then changed his mind and got wine too. The waiter left them with menus that were bigger than necessary. How's the project deadline? Ethan asked. Finished it at 2 in the morning yesterday. Client hated it, asked for 17 changes, then approved the original design I sent them 3 weeks ago. Lena took a sip of wine. How's the cabinet? Still sitting in my workshop, judging me for procrastinating. Furniture can't judge you. You haven't seen this cabinet. She smiled, and Ethan felt that same loosening in his chest he'd felt at the diner. Like breathing was easier when she was around. They ordered food, pasta for her, chicken parmesan for him, and fell into the kind of conversation that picked up right where they'd left off, no awkward restart needed. Mason asked about you, Ethan said. Lena's eyebrows went up. He did? Wanted to know if you were nice, if I was going to see you again. What did you tell him? That you were nice, that I wanted to see you again. Ethan turned his wine glass in his hands. He's too invested in my dating life for a 7-year-old.
Maybe he just wants you to be happy. Maybe I don't know how to explain to him that it's more complicated than that. Lena set down her glass. Is it more complicated? Isn't everything? Sometimes, but sometimes we make things complicated because simple feels too scary. She tilted her head, studying him. You're doing it right now, the thing where you deflect by making it philosophical. I don't do that. You absolutely do that. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. She was right. He'd spent 3 years turning everything into abstract concepts instead of dealing with actual feelings. Safer that way. Less chance of getting hurt. You're annoyingly perceptive, he said. I know, it's one of my worst qualities. She leaned forward. Can I ask you something? That question always makes me nervous. Good instinct. What are you actually afraid of? With this? With us? The word hung there between them. Us.
Like they were already something, not just two people who'd had coffee and burgers and were now eating overpriced pasta. That'll screw it up, Ethan said. That'll be too much or not enough or just wrong. That you'll realize I'm boring and stuck and still half in love with a life that doesn't exist anymore. Are you? Still in love with her? No, but I'm in love with who I thought I was when I was with her, the version of me that had it all figured out. He stared at his wine. Turns out that guy was an idiot. We were all idiots at some point. Lena's voice was soft. I married someone who told me my art was a waste of time, and I believed him. Spent 6 years making myself smaller so he'd feel bigger. That's not love, that's just fear with better marketing. What are you afraid of? She didn't hesitate. That I'll disappear again. That I'll meet someone who seems great, and I'll slowly give up pieces of myself until there's nothing left. That I'll wake up one day and realize I traded my whole life for someone else's approval. She met his eyes. And that I'll do it anyway, because being alone is worse. The waiter arrived with their food, breaking the moment. They ate in silence for a while, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Ethan watched her twirl pasta on her fork, the way she chewed thoughtfully, like she was analyzing the recipe. He wondered what she saw when she looked at him. Probably someone as scared and scarred as she was. My therapist would love this conversation, Lena said eventually. She's always telling me to be more vulnerable. How's that working out? Terrible. I hate it. But apparently it's healthy or whatever. She pointed her fork at him. What about you? You said you tried therapy once. Yeah, lasted exactly 3 sessions. What happened? Ethan cut into his chicken, watching cheese stretch between the pieces. The therapist asked me to describe my perfect day. And I couldn't. I just sat there, completely blank. Couldn't picture a single thing that would make me happy. Jesus. That's when I realized I'd spent so long just surviving that I forgot what living actually felt like. He took a bite, chewed, swallowed. So I stopped going. Figured it was easier to not think about it. And now? Now I'm sitting here with you, eating mediocre chicken, having the most honest conversation I've had in years. He looked at her. So maybe things are changing. Lena smiled, small and real. Mediocre chicken. Wow. You really know how to sweet-talk a woman. I'm out of practice. I've noticed. They finished eating and ordered tiramisu to split, even though neither of them was particularly hungry. The restaurant was filling up now, voices rising around them, but their corner felt separate, protected, like they'd carved out a small space where the rest of the world couldn't quite reach. Tell me about your art, Ethan said. The stuff you wanted to do before the graphic design. Lena's expression shifted. Surprise, then something guarded. Why? Because you brought it up at the diner, and then we moved on. But I could tell it mattered. Still matters. She was quiet for a moment, fork pushing tiramisu around the plate. I wanted to paint. Big, weird, abstract stuff that didn't make sense to anyone but me. I had a studio apartment in college where I'd stay up until 3 in the morning, just covering canvases with color. Her voice went soft, distant. My ex hated it, said it was childish, a hobby, not a real career, and I listened to him because I thought that's what adults did. Put away the silly dreams and get practical. Do you still paint? Haven't in almost 5 years. Why not? Because every time I think about it, I hear his voice telling me it's a waste of time. And I get angry at myself for still letting him control me, even though he's been gone for a year. She looked up at Ethan. Pathetic, right? No, it's human. Same thing sometimes. Ethan thought about his workshop, about all the projects he'd started and abandoned because they reminded him of better times, about how he'd stopped building anything beautiful, anything with soul, and focused only on what paid the bills. Different medium, same fear. What if you tried again, he asked. Just once. See what happens. What if I'm not good anymore? What if you are? Lena stared at him, something complicated moving behind her eyes. Then she laughed, sharp and surprised. You're kind of pushy, you know that? I'm really not. You are. In this quiet, sneaky way. She pointed at him with her fork. I'm on to you, Ethan Cole. Noted. They left the restaurant around 9, walking out into a night that had turned cold and clear. Stars were visible despite the streetlights, scattered across the sky like someone had spilled salt. Lena pulled her jacket tight and breathed out fog. I parked 2 blocks over, she said. Street parking's a nightmare around here. I'll walk you. You don't have to. I know. They walked slowly, neither one in a hurry. The streets were quiet for a Wednesday, just a few cars passing, a couple coming out of a bar down the block. Ethan's hands were in his pockets, and he was hyper-aware of the space between them, close enough to touch, far enough to be safe. Can I tell you something weird? Lena asked. You keep asking that. I'm starting to think you're actually weird. Oh, I definitely am, but this is different. She glanced at him. I've been on maybe a dozen first dates since my divorce. And every single one, I spent the whole time planning my exit strategy, watching the clock counting down until I could politely leave. And this time? This time I forgot to look at my phone once. She stopped walking, turning to face him. They were under a streetlight, her face half in shadow. I don't know what that means. Ethan's heart was doing something complicated in his chest. Maybe it means you weren't looking for an exit. Maybe. Or maybe it means I'm getting reckless in my old age. You're 34. That's not old. Tell that to my knees. She smiled, but it faded quickly. I'm scared, Ethan. I'm really scared I'm going to mess this up. You're not the only one. I know. That's what makes it worse. We're both terrified, and we're still doing this anyway. She shook her head. We're idiots. Probably. Definitely. They stood there on the empty street, looking at each other. Ethan thought about kissing her. The idea arrived fully formed, urgent and terrifying. He could lean forward, close that small distance, see what happened. But something held him back. Not fear exactly, but caution. The sense that rushing this would break whatever fragile thing they were building. Lena seemed to be having the same thought. She took a small step back, creating space. I should go. Early meeting tomorrow with a client who thinks Comic Sans is a legitimate font choice. That's a deal breaker. Right? I'm questioning our entire professional relationship. They started walking again. Her car was parked under a broken streetlight, a pool of shadow in the orange glow. She unlocked it and tossed her bag inside, then turned back to him. Same time next week? She asked. Yeah. Or sooner, if you want. Sooner might be good. She bit her lip, and Ethan realized she did that when she was nervous. This is going to sound desperate, but I don't care. I really like talking to you, and I don't really like talking to most people. I really like talking to you too. Good, okay. She got into her car, then rolled down the window. Text me when you get home. So I know you didn't get murdered between here and wherever you parked. You text me too. Deal. She drove off, and Ethan walked back to his truck feeling lighter than he had in months. Maybe years. His phone buzzed before he even made it to the corner. Made it to my car without incident. Your turn. He smiled and wrote back, still walking. We'll report in shortly. Don't get mugged. I'll do my best. The drive home passed in a blur of streetlights and replayed conversation. Ethan kept hearing her voice. I really like talking to you. And feeling the weight of what she'd said. Not what it could mean or might mean, but what it actually meant right now, in this moment. 2 people choosing to be honest instead of safe. Mason was already asleep when Ethan got home, curled up with Doctor. Trunk, his nightlight casting dinosaur shapes on the walls. Ethan stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him breathe,
This kid who worried about him, who wanted him to be happy, who somehow knew things Ethan was still figuring out. His mother was in the kitchen, making tea she didn't need. She looked up when he came in. "Good night?" she asked. "Yeah, Ma, good night." "I'm glad." She poured hot water over a tea bag, the chamomile smell filling the kitchen. "She sounds special."
The way you talk about her. I've known her a week. Your father knew after 3 days. Ethan leaned against the counter. That's different. Why? Because it just is. His mother smiled, the same knowing smile she'd had since he was a kid trying to hide things. Whatever you say, honey, there's leftover pot roast in the fridge if you're hungry. He wasn't, but he heated some up anyway, more for something to do with his hands than actual hunger. Sat at the kitchen table while his mother did the crossword puzzle from the morning paper, both of them comfortable in the quiet. This was their routine, had been since she moved in. Small moments of company that didn't require conversation. His phone buzzed, home safe, no muggings, pretty boring night overall. Ethan smiled and wrote back, same, except for the part where I had dinner with someone interesting. Who's that? Funny. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I have a confession. He straightened up. What? I Googled you. Ethan's stomach dropped. When? After our first date. I wanted to make sure you weren't a serial killer or secretly married or something. And, clean record, boring social media, exactly 1 photo of you at some lumberyard looking very serious about wood. That was a professional conference. Sure it was. The dots appeared again. I'm sorry. I know that's probably invasive. Did you find anything interesting? Just that you're exactly who you said you were, which is somehow more terrifying than finding out you had a secret life. Ethan stared at his phone, something warm spreading through his chest. Why is that terrifying? Because it means you're real, and real people can hurt you. He understood that. Understood it bone deep, in the way you understand things that have already happened to you. Real people can also be worth it, he wrote. The response came quickly. I'm starting to believe that. They texted until almost midnight, nothing important, just the small details of their days. Lena told him about her client meeting, the one who loved Comic Sans. He told her about Mason's school project, how they were supposed to build a model of the solar system, and he'd chosen to make Saturn's rings out of pool noodles. She sent him a photo of her apartment, messy, full of half-finished design projects and takeout containers. He sent her one of his workshop at night, the cabinet still waiting. You should finish that, she wrote. Tomorrow. Promise? Promise. When he finally fell asleep, it was after 2 a.m, and he was smiling. The days started blurring together after that, marked only by when he'd see Lena next. They fell into a pattern, dinner twice a week, long text conversations in between, the occasional phone call that lasted hours without either of them noticing. Ethan finished the cabinet and started a new project, a bookshelf for a client who wanted something modern and minimal. He found himself working with more care, more attention, like Lena's voice in his head reminded him that beautiful things were worth the effort. Mason noticed. You're humming, he said one afternoon, watching Ethan sand wood in the workshop. Am I? Yeah, you never hum. Ethan stopped, realizing his son was right. When had he started doing that? Just in a good mood, I guess. Because of Lena? Partly. Mason climbed up onto the workbench, legs dangling. He'd grown in the last month, or maybe Ethan was just noticing it now. When do I get to meet her? I don't know, bud. We're still figuring things out. But you like her? Yeah, I do. Does she like you? Ethan set down the sandpaper. I think so. I hope so. Then you should let me meet her. I'm good at meeting people. Mason said it with complete confidence, like it was an established fact. I met Jamie's dad's girlfriend, and I told her she had nice shoes, and she gave me a cookie. That's basically extortion. What's extortion? Never mind. Ethan ruffled his hair. When the time's right, okay? I don't want to rush it. Mason considered this, swinging his legs. Okay, but don't wait too long. What if she gets impatient and finds someone else? Where are you learning this stuff? TV and Jamie. He knows a lot about dating. Jamie's 7. He says his dad knows a lot, and he tells him things. Ethan made a mental note to have a talk with Jamie's dad about appropriate conversation topics for second graders. Well, I appreciate the concern, but I think we're okay for now. If you say so. Mason hopped down from the bench. Can we have tacos for dinner? Sure. With the crunchy shells? Is there any other kind? Mason grinned and ran off, and Ethan went back to his sanding. But his son's question stuck with him. When would he introduce Lena to Mason? When would this thing between them become real enough to include the most important person in his life? He brought it up with Lena that night over the phone. She was at home. He could hear her moving around, the sound of dishes clattering. Mason wants to meet you, he said. There was a pause. Really? He's been asking about you. Thinks I'm going to lose you if I don't act fast. Lena laughed. Smart kid. When does he think this meeting should happen? Soon, but I told him we'd wait until we were ready. Are we ready? Ethan sat down on his bed, phone pressed to his ear. Outside his window, the October night was clear and cold. I don't know. I've never done this before. The introducing someone to my kid part. I've never been introduced to someone's kid before. So we're even. He heard water running, then shutting off. Does it scare you? Yeah. What if he doesn't like you? Or what if he does like you, and then things don't work out between us, and he gets hurt? Those are both valid fears. That's not helpful. I know, sorry. Lena was quiet for a moment. Here's what I think. Mason's going to be okay regardless, because you're his dad and you'll make sure of it. And if things don't work out between us, which, for the record, I'm really hoping they do, but if they don't, you'll handle it. You'll both handle it. You sound sure. I'm not, but I'm trying this thing where I don't let fear make all my decisions. How's that going? Terrifying, but also kind of liberating. He heard her moving again, the creak of what sounded like a couch. Can I tell you something? Always. I bought paint. Ethan sat up straighter. You did? After our last conversation, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I went to the art store, and I bought canvases and brushes and paint. Like, way too much paint. My living room looks like an art supply warehouse exploded. That's great, Lena. I haven't used any of it yet. It's all just sitting there staring at me. But I bought it. That's something, right? That's everything. She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob or both. I'm 34 years old and I'm terrified of paint. How pathetic is that? It's not pathetic, it's honest. Ethan lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling. You want to know what I did today? What? Started building something that isn't for a client, just for me. A chair, nothing fancy. But I'm making it the way I want to, not the way someone else thinks it should be. That's huge. It's a chair. It's not about the chair, Ethan. It's about the choice. Her voice was soft. We're both doing it, choosing to do things that scare us. Yeah, we are. They talked for another hour about nothing and everything. Lena told him about her favorite painting professor in college, how he used to say that good art came from the places that hurt. Ethan told her about his father teaching him to use a chisel, the patience it required, the respect for the wood. They talked about their marriages, their divorces, the ways they'd both shrunk themselves down to fit into spaces that were never meant for them. When they finally hung up, Ethan felt wrung out and oddly peaceful. He checked on Mason, still asleep, then stood in his workshop in the dark. The chair sat on the workbench, barely started, just rough pieces waiting to be shaped. He ran his hand along the wood, feeling the grain, the potential. Fear is just a habit, Lena's friend had said, and habits can be broken. Maybe it was time to start breaking some. The following Saturday, Ethan invited Lena to his place for the first time. She arrived at 2 p.m, pulling up in her beat-up Honda with a nervous smile. Ethan met her at the door, acutely aware of his mother inside watching some home renovation show and Mason upstairs supposedly doing homework, but probably playing on his tablet. Hi, Lena said. Hi. They stood there on the porch, suddenly awkward. They'd been texting and calling for 2 weeks now, had gone on 5 actual dates, but somehow this felt different, more real. She was at his house, stepping into his actual life, not just the controlled environments of restaurants and coffee shops. Come in, Ethan said, stepping aside. Lena walked into the living room, looking around with open curiosity. The house was clean, his mother had insisted, but cluttered with life. Mason's backpack by the stairs, a puzzle taking over the coffee table, photographs on the walls showing various stages of Ethan's life. Lena stopped at one, a picture of him and his father at a job site, both of them covered in sawdust and grinning.
"That's him?" she asked softly. "Yeah, that was about 6 months before he died. You look like him." "Everyone says that." His mother appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Ellen Cole was 62 and composed, the kind of woman who'd raised 3 sons and still had fight left in her. She smiled at Lena, warm but assessing. "You must be Lena. I'm Ellen. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Cole." "Please call me Ellen. Mrs. Cole makes me feel ancient." She glanced at Ethan. "I was just about to head out. Book club at Patricia's." Ethan frowned. "Your book club's not until Thursday." "Is it? Well, I must have gotten confused." She grabbed her purse, still smiling. "You two have a nice afternoon. Mason's upstairs if you need him." She left before Ethan could call her bluff, and he turned to find Lena trying not to laugh. "Subtle," she said. "She thinks she's helping." "She probably is." They stood there in the living room, that awkwardness creeping back. Ethan shoved his hands in his pockets. "You want to see the workshop? It's kind of a mess, but I'd love to." He led her through the house and out the back door to the converted garage where he spent most of his time. The workshop smelled like sawdust and varnish, afternoon light slanting through the windows and turning everything gold. Projects in various stages covered every surface. The bookshelf for his client, the chair he was making for himself, half a dozen smaller pieces waiting for attention. Lena walked slowly around the space, touching things gently. She stopped at the chair, running her fingers along the arm. "This is beautiful." "It's not finished." "It's still beautiful." She looked at him. "You're really talented, you know that?" "I'm okay." "You're better than okay. This is art, Ethan. Functional art, but art." She gestured around the workshop. "All of this. It's what I was trying to do with painting. Make something that matters, something that lasts." "Wood lasts longer than paint." "Maybe, but paint gets to be pure expression. Wood has to be useful." She tilted her head. "Which do you think is harder?" "Making something beautiful that also serves a purpose." "Why?" Ethan thought about it, really thought. "Because you can't hide behind the expression part. It has to work. It has to hold weight and stand up to use. But if that's all it does, if it's just functional, then you've made something cold. Something without soul." Lena was looking at him with an expression he couldn't read. "That's exactly it. That's the balance." "What?" "The thing I could never figure out with my art. I was so focused on making it meaningful that I forgot it also had to connect with people, had to serve some purpose, even if that purpose was just making someone feel something." She leaned against his workbench. "You get that. You've always gotten it." "I just make furniture." "Stop doing that." "What?" "Minimizing what you do. It's more than furniture. It's craft and care and paying attention to details most people ignore." She picked up one of his chisels, tested the edge carefully. "This is what I'm trying to get back to. The part of me that cared about making things matter." Heavy footsteps on the stairs inside the house announced Mason's arrival before he burst through the door to the workshop. He stopped short when he saw Lena, suddenly shy in a way Ethan had never seen him. "Hi," Mason said. "Hi," Lena said back. "You must be Mason." "Yeah." He glanced at Ethan, then back to Lena. "My dad talks about you a lot." "Mason," Ethan started. "It's okay," Lena said, smiling. "I talk about your dad a lot, too." Mason grinned, some of his shyness evaporating. "Do you like dinosaurs?" "I don't know that much about them, but I like learning new things." "I know everything about dinosaurs. Want me to tell you?" "Mason," Ethan tried again. Maybe give Lena a chance to—" "I'd love to hear about dinosaurs," Lena said, cutting him off. She crouched down to Mason's level. "What's your favorite?" And just like that, Mason was off, explaining in exhaustive detail the difference between velociraptors and Deinonychus, why the Jurassic Park movies got it all wrong, and how he was definitely going to be a paleontologist when he grew up. Lena listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Mason light up even more. Ethan watched them, something tight in his chest loosening. He'd been so worried about this meeting, about whether Mason would like her or she'd like him,
whether it would feel forced or awkward. But here they were, his son talking about Cretaceous period predators, and Lena taking it all in like it was the most important information she'd ever heard. After 20 minutes, Mason finally wound down. "Do you want to see my dinosaur collection?" "Absolutely." Mason grabbed her hand, just reached out and took it like it was the most natural thing in the world, and dragged her toward the house. Ethan followed, watching Lena let herself be pulled along, laughing at something Mason said. Upstairs in Mason's room, controlled chaos reigned. Toys everywhere, clothes on the floor, posters of dinosaurs covering the walls. Mason started pulling books off his shelf, showing Lena his favorites, explaining which ones had the best pictures and which ones were too babyish now that he was 7. Lena sat cross-legged on the floor, looking at each book he handed her with careful attention. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, just watching. This was his life, messy and imperfect and completely real. And here she was, fitting into it like maybe she'd always been meant to. "Dad," Mason said, looking up, "can Lena stay for dinner?" Ethan looked at her. She looked back, eyebrows raised in question. "If she wants to," Ethan said. "I want to," Lena said softly. Mason whooped and went back to his books. Ethan pulled out his phone and texted his mother. "Coast is clear. You can come back." Her response was immediate. "Took you long enough. Be home in 20. Dinner was spaghetti and meatballs, simple and filling. Ellen came back with stories about her fictional book club, and Lena played along, asking what they were reading. Mason dominated the conversation, telling Lena about school and his best friend Jamie and the solar system project they were working on. "Pool noodles for Saturn's rings," Lena said, nodding seriously. "That's genius." "That's what I said." Mason looked at Ethan triumphantly. After dinner, Mason asked if he could show Lena his tablet game, and Ethan said yes, even though it was almost bedtime. They sat on the couch together, Mason explaining the rules while Lena tried to keep up. Ethan washed dishes with his mother, both of them watching through the kitchen doorway. "She's lovely," Ellen said quietly. "Yeah. Mason likes her." "I can see that." "Do you like her?" Ethan dried a plate, set it in the rack. "More than I probably should this early," his mother smiled. "There's no timeline for these things, honey. Your father proposed after knowing me for 6 weeks. That was different." "Why does everyone keep saying that?" "Because it was a different time, different circumstances." "Love is love, then or now." She handed him another plate. "Don't overthink it." But Ethan couldn't help overthinking it. That was what he did. Analyze and worry and plan for every possible disaster. It's what had kept him safe for 3 years. It's also what had kept him lonely. At 8:30, Mason started yawning, and Ethan declared it bedtime. Mason argued, but only half-heartedly, his eyes already drooping. He hugged Lena goodnight, another casual gesture that made Ethan's chest tight, and trudged upstairs with Dr. Trunk under one arm. Ellen excused herself to her room, leaving Ethan and Lena alone in the living room. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, the space between them feeling both too far and too close. "That went well," Lena said. "He loved you. He's a great kid. You're doing something right." "I'm mostly just trying not to screw him up too badly." Lena shifted closer, just slightly. "Can I ask you something?" "You don't have to keep asking permission." "Do you think this is crazy? Us, moving this fast?" Ethan turned to look at her. In the lamplight, her eyes looked more brown than green, and she had a smudge of something, maybe paint, maybe just dirt, on her left cheek. She looked nervous and hopeful and beautiful. "Yeah," he said, "I think it's probably crazy. But I don't care." The words came out before he could stop them, raw and honest. "I've spent 3 years being careful, being safe, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being afraid." Lena smiled, and it was the most genuine smile he'd seen from her yet. "Me too." She leaned forward, and so did he, and suddenly they were kissing. Soft at first, tentative, like they were both waiting for permission that didn't need giving. Then deeper, her hand coming up to his face, his fingers tangling in her hair. She tasted like the wine from dinner and something sweeter, and Ethan felt like he was falling and flying at the same time. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Lena laughed quietly. "We're definitely crazy." "Absolutely." "I should go, before your mom comes back down and we have to explain this." Probably a good idea. But neither of them moved. They sat there, foreheads touching, breathing the same air, and Ethan thought about second chances and new beginnings, and all the cliches he'd always rolled his eyes at. Turned out they were cliches because they were true. "Stay," he said quietly. "Ethan, just for a little longer, please." So she stayed. They stayed curled up on the couch until almost 11, talking in quiet voices about everything and nothing. When Lena finally left, Ethan stood on the porch watching her drive away, feeling like something fundamental had shifted. Not just between them, but inside him. Like a door he'd nailed shut was suddenly opening and light was flooding in. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of normalcy that felt anything but normal. Lena started coming over for dinner twice a week, sometimes bringing takeout, sometimes cooking with Ethan while Mason did homework at the kitchen table. She fit into their routine so easily, it was almost frightening. Mason adored her, Ellen approved in her quiet way, and Ethan found himself thinking about the future in a way he hadn't allowed himself to in years. It was too fast. He knew it was too fast. But knowing something and being able to stop it were two entirely different things. On a Thursday night in early November, Lena called him at 10:30, which was late for her. Ethan was in bed reading a book he wasn't actually reading, just turning pages while thinking about her. He answered on the first ring. "Hey," he said. There was a pause, and in that pause, Ethan heard something wrong. Not silence, but the absence of her usual ease. "Can you talk?" He sat up. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Maybe. I don't know." Her voice was tight, controlled in a way that meant she was working hard to keep it that way. "I got an email tonight from my ex-husband." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. In all their conversations, Lena had mentioned her ex in only the vaguest terms. A controlling jerk. Someone who'd made her small. But never a name, never details. And Ethan hadn't pushed. Everyone had a past they didn't want to excavate. What did he want? "He says we need to talk, that there's unfinished business from the divorce settlement." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "We've been divorced for over a year. Everything was finalized. What unfinished business could there possibly be?" "Did you respond?" "No, I just stared at it for an hour trying to figure out what game he's playing." A sound like she was moving, pacing maybe. "Marcus doesn't do anything without a reason, and his reasons are never good." Marcus. Now the ex had a name. Ethan tried to picture him and came up blank. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Ignore it, probably. He doesn't get to just show up in my inbox and demand my attention. That's what he used to do, and I'm not playing that game anymore." But Ethan could hear the fear underneath her anger. Whatever this Marcus guy wanted, it had rattled her. "Do you want me to come over? It's almost 11. "I don't care." Another pause, longer this time. "No, I'm okay. I just needed to hear your voice." She took a shaky breath. "Sorry. I know this is a lot. Don't apologize. I feel like I'm bringing my mess into your life." "Lena, everyone has mess. That's just being human." Ethan lay back down, phone pressed to his ear. "You've been dealing with mine, the divorce, the fear, all of it. Let me deal with some of yours." "This is different. Marcus is—" She trailed off. "He's not a good person, Ethan. When we were together, he made me doubt everything. My work, my choices, my worth. He had this way of twisting things, so I was always the problem. Always the one who needed to change. That's abuse. I know, my therapist says the same thing, but it's hard to see it that way when you're in it. When someone you love is telling you that you're too sensitive, too emotional, too difficult, you start believing it." Ethan thought about Vanessa, about the ways she'd made him feel inadequate without ever saying it directly. The sighs when he suggested staying in instead of going out. The comments about other couples and their adventures. The slow erosion of his confidence until he believed he was exactly as boring as she implied. "I get it," he said. "Maybe not the same way, but I get it. I'm scared he's going to try something, pull me back into his orbit." Her voice got smaller. "And I'm scared I'll let him." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're not the same person you were when you left him. You're stronger now. You know what you deserve." "Do I?" "Yeah, you do." Ethan stared at his ceiling, at the shadows moving across it from the tree outside his window. And if he tries anything, I'm here. Whatever you need." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, "Thank you." They talked for another hour about nothing related to her ex. She told him about a new client project, something for a local brewery that wanted to rebrand. He told her about Mason's latest obsession with black holes and how dinner conversation now regularly included discussions of event horizons. Normal things, safe things, until Lena's voice lost that tight quality and she sounded like herself again. When they finally hung up, Ethan lay awake for a long time, staring at the dark ceiling. He had a bad feeling about this Marcus guy. The kind of bad feeling that came from experience, from knowing that some people didn't let go easily, didn't let go at all. 3 days later, the bad feeling proved justified. Ethan was in his workshop finishing the bookshelf when Lena's car pulled into his driveway at 2 in the afternoon on a Sunday. He wasn't expecting her until dinner. Through the window, he watched her get out, and even from a distance he could see something was wrong. Her movements were jerky, frantic. She came straight to the workshop door and didn't knock, just opened it and stood there. Her face was pale, her eyes red. She'd been crying. "Lena, he showed up at my apartment." Ethan set down his tools immediately. "When?" "An hour ago, just knocked on my door like he had every right to be there." Her hands were shaking. "I didn't let him in, but he wouldn't leave. Kept saying we needed to talk, that I was being unreasonable, that he'd driven all this way, and the least I could do was hear him out." "Did you call the police?" "And say what? My ex-husband knocked on my door? They're divorced, not enemies, officer." She wrapped her arms around herself. "He didn't threaten me, didn't do anything illegal. He just stood there being charming and concerned, like he was worried about me, like he cared." "What did he want?" "He says there was a mistake in the divorce paperwork. Something about a joint account that never got properly divided. He wants me to sign some papers." She laughed, that same bitter sound from the phone call. "But I checked with my lawyer after he left. There's no mistake. Everything was handled. He's lying." Ethan crossed to her, put his hands on her shoulders. She was trembling. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd review the papers and get back to him. But I won't. I can't. I don't know what he's trying to do, but it's not about money." She looked up at Ethan, and her eyes were full of fear. He looked good, healthy, happy, and that made it worse because it means he's fine. He moved on like I was nothing, and now he's back because he wants something. "You don't have to deal with him alone." "I don't want to deal with him at all. I want him to disappear, to stay disappeared." She pulled away, started pacing the small workshop space. "I was doing so good, Ethan. I was painting again. Actually painting, not just buying supplies. I was sleeping through the night. I was happy. And now he's back and I can feel all of it crumbling." "It's not crumbling. It feels like it." Ethan caught her hand as she paced past him, pulled her to a stop. "Listen to me. Whatever he wants, whatever game he's playing, you don't have to play along. You have a lawyer. You have friends. You have me." He squeezed her hand. "You're not alone in this." She stared at him and something in her face cracked. "I'm so tired of being strong. I'm so tired of having to protect myself from someone who's supposed to be in my past." "Then don't be strong today. Be tired. Be scared. Be whatever you need to be." He pulled her closer. "But don't let him make you believe you're back where you started. You're not." Lena pressed her face against his chest, and he felt her shoulders shake. He held her while she cried, one hand rubbing slow circles on her back, the other tangled in her hair. The workshop smelled like sawdust and varnish and her shampoo, something floral he couldn't name. Outside, a cold wind rattled the windows. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were swollen but clearer. "Sorry, I didn't mean to fall apart on you." "You didn't fall apart. You had a human reaction to a bad situation." "Same thing. Not even close." She almost smiled. "Can I stay here for a while? I don't want to go home, not yet." "You can stay as long as you want." They went inside. Ellen was at her book club, the real one this time, and Mason was at Jamie's house for a play date. The house was quiet, empty in a way that felt safe rather than lonely. Lena curled up on the couch, and Ethan made coffee that neither of them drank. "Tell me about him," Ethan said, sitting beside her. "If you want to." Lena pulled a blanket around herself. "Marcus is a lawyer, Corporate law, very successful, makes a lot of money. We met in college.
He was 2 years ahead of me, already doing the law school thing. I thought he was so impressive, so sure of himself. She stared at her coffee mug. He was impressive at first, confident, ambitious, knew exactly what he wanted, and what he wanted was me. When did it change? Gradually, so gradually I didn't notice until it was too late. He'd make a comment about my clothes being too casual, and I'd start dressing up more. He'd suggest I spend less time on my art, focus on building my client base, and I'd convince myself he was being practical. Little things that added up to me completely losing myself. Ethan thought about control, about how it rarely announced itself, how it disguised itself as care, as concern, as just trying to help. When did you realize? The vasectomy was the breaking point, but honestly, I think I knew for years before that. I just didn't want to admit it. Admitting it meant I had wasted almost a decade on someone who didn't actually love me. Who loved the idea of me, maybe, or the version of me he could mold into what he wanted, but not the real me. That's not your fault. I know, in my head I know, but there's this voice that sounds suspiciously like him saying, if I'd just been better, more agreeable, less difficult, maybe things would have worked. She looked at Ethan. You ever have that voice? Every day. He set down his coffee. Vanessa used to say I was too content, like it was an insult, and for years after she left, I believed her, believed that wanting a quiet life with someone I loved was somehow a failure, that I should have been more exciting, more spontaneous, more something. But you weren't the problem, she was. And Marcus wasn't your fault. He was the problem. Ethan reached over, took her hand. We can know these things intellectually and still struggle with believing them. That's normal. Lena squeezed his hand. How are you so good at this? At what? Being here, not running away when things get complicated. I'm terrified. Really? Yeah. This whole thing with your ex showing up, it's bringing up every insecurity I have. What if he wants you back? What if you realize he's more successful, more impressive, more everything than I am? What if I'm just a rebound while you figure out what you actually want? She turned to face him fully. Ethan, look at me. Marcus could show up with $1 million and a promise to change everything about himself, and I still wouldn't go back. You know why? Why? Because he never saw me. Not really. He saw a project. Someone to fix and mold and control, but you, her voice caught. You see me. The messy, scared, still figuring it out me. And you don't try to fix it. You just accept it. There's nothing to fix. See? That's why I'm not going anywhere. She leaned against him, and Ethan wrapped his arm around her. But I need your help with something. Anything. I need you to not let me cave. If Marcus keeps pushing, if he tries to manipulate me or make me doubt myself, I need you to remind me why I left, why I can't go back, even just to talk to him, even just to be polite. I can't give him an inch. I'll be here. Whatever you need. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped up in each other, the afternoon light shifting across the living room floor. Ethan felt the weight of what they were building, something real and solid and worth protecting, but also fragile, so easily broken if they weren't careful. His phone buzzed. Mason, texting that Jamie's mom was bringing him home in an hour. Lena saw it and sat up. I should go before he gets back. I don't want him seeing me like this. He wouldn't mind. I know, but I would. She stood, straightening her clothes. Thank you for not making me feel crazy. You're not crazy? Today I feel pretty close. Ethan walked her to the door. On the porch, she turned back to him, and he saw her gathering courage for something. I'm falling in love with you, she said. And that terrifies me, because the last time I loved someone, I lost myself. And I can't do that again. Ethan's heart was doing something complicated in his chest, expanding and contracting at the same time. You won't. I won't let you. Promise? Promise. She kissed him, quick and fierce, then got in her car and drove away. Ethan stood on the porch long after her taillights disappeared, feeling the November cold seep through his shirt. I'm falling in love with you. She'd said it like a confession, like something shameful, but all Ethan heard was possibility. Mason came home full of energy and stories about the playdate. They'd built a fort and played video games and eaten too much pizza.
Ethan listened with half his attention, the other half still replaying Lena's words. When Mason finally wound down enough to ask about his day, Ethan said it was quiet. Good, normal. He didn't mention Lena's visit, didn't mention her ex or her fear or the way she trembled in his arms. Mason didn't need to carry that. Let him stay 7 and innocent a little longer. That night, after Mason was asleep and Ellen had retired to her room, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his phone. He pulled up Lena's contact, typed and deleted 3 different messages. Finally settled on, "You okay?" Her response came 20 minutes later. "No, but I will be." He wanted to say more, wanted to tell her he was falling too, that it terrified him just as much, that he'd never felt this way about anyone, including his ex-wife. But the words felt too big for a text message, too important to send through a screen. Tomorrow, he decided. He'd tell her tomorrow. Except tomorrow brought its own problems. Ethan was working on a custom dining table for a client when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Is this Ethan Cole?" A man's voice, smooth and professional. "Yeah, who's this?" "Marcus Hartley. I'm Lena's ex-husband. I was hoping we could talk." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "About?" "About Lena. I understand you two have been seeing each other." A pause, calculated. "I'm concerned about her. She's been through a lot, and I don't think she's in a good place to be making decisions about relationships." "I don't think that's your business anymore." "I disagree. I spent 8 years with her. I know her patterns, her vulnerabilities. And right now she's vulnerable." Marcus's voice stayed calm, reasonable. "I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just think someone should be looking out for her interests, making sure she's not rushing into something she'll regret. She seems pretty clear about what she wants." "Does she?" "Because from where I'm standing, she's running. That's what she does when things get hard. She runs, and she finds someone to validate her feelings, and then 6 months later she realizes she made a mistake." A soft laugh. "I'm not saying you're a mistake. I'm saying she needs time. Space to process the divorce properly, to heal before jumping into something new." Ethan forced himself to breathe evenly. "You done?" "I'm trying to help." "No. You're trying to control her. Even now, even divorced, you can't let go." Ethan set down his chisel, focusing entirely on the conversation. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave her alone. No more emails, no more showing up at her apartment, no more calls to her friends, or apparently her boyfriend. You're done. And if I'm not, then we'll make sure a judge explains it to you." Silence on the other end. When Marcus spoke again, the professional veneer had cracked slightly. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. Lena and I have history, connections you can't just sever because it's convenient." "I know enough." Ethan's voice stayed steady, despite the anger rising in his chest. "And I know you don't get to harass her just because you regret how things ended." "Harass?" Marcus laughed, sharp. "I'm trying to settle the financial loose ends from our divorce. If she'd just signed the papers, I'd be out of her life, but she's being difficult, as usual. Her lawyer says there are no loose ends." Another pause, longer this time. "She told you about that?" "She tells me everything." "Then you know she's unstable, emotional, not someone you can build a future with." Marcus's voice turned almost pitying. "Trust me, I tried. It doesn't work. She'll drain you, make everything about her needs, her fears, her constant need for validation. You seem like a decent guy. Don't make my mistake." Ethan thought about Lena on his couch, scared and human and real. Thought about her laugh, her art supplies taking over her apartment, the way she'd listened to Mason talk about dinosaurs like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. Thought about her honesty, her vulnerability, the courage it took for her to keep showing up even when she was terrified. "She's not the problem," Ethan said quietly. "You are." He hung up. For a moment he just stood there, phone in hand, anger and adrenaline making his hands shake. Then he called Lena. She answered immediately. "Your ex just called me." "What?" Her voice went sharp with panic. "How did he get your number?" "I don't know, but he tried to convince me you were unstable, that I should back off and give you space to heal properly." "Oh no, Ethan, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. He's the one who should be apologizing. To you, for years of this bullshit." Ethan started pacing his workshop. We need to shut this down now before it gets worse. How? I don't know. Restraining order? Something legal that makes it clear he needs to leave you alone. Lena was quiet for a moment. That'll make him angry. Good. Let him be angry somewhere far away from you. You don't understand. When Marcus gets angry, he doesn't just yell. He gets strategic. He finds ways to make your life difficult while looking completely reasonable to everyone else. Her voice shook. He'll dig into my finances, my client relationships, maybe even your business. He has resources, connections. I've seen him destroy people who crossed him. So we just let him intimidate you? No, but we have to be smart about this. She took a shaky breath. Let me talk to my lawyer, see what our options are. In the meantime, don't engage with him. Don't answer if he calls again. Nothing we say will make this better. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to drive to wherever this Marcus guy was and have a very different kind of conversation. But Lena was right. Getting aggressive would only give Marcus ammunition. They needed to be smart. Okay, he said, but if he shows up here, I'm not being polite. He won't. You're not his target. I am. She paused. I need to see you. Can I come over tonight? Mason has soccer practice until 6, but after that, yeah, come for dinner. I'll bring wine. We're going to need it. They hung up, and Ethan stood in his workshop surrounded by half-finished projects, feeling something dark settle over him. This Marcus guy was a problem. A real problem. And Ethan had no idea how to fix it without making things worse. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You should ask Lena about why we really got divorced. She'll give you her version, but there are two sides to every story. Just something to think about. Ethan deleted it without responding. Whatever game Marcus was playing, he wasn't going to win. Dinner that night was tense despite everyone's efforts to keep it normal. Lena smiled and laughed at Mason's stories, helped Ellen with the dishes, acted like everything was fine. But Ethan saw the strain around her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly when she thought no one was looking. After Mason went to bed, they sat on the porch, even though it was too cold, both of them needing the privacy. Lena had a glass of wine she wasn't drinking, and Ethan had a beer he'd barely touched. My lawyer says we have options, Lena said, but they're all going to be expensive and time-consuming. Restraining order requires proof of harassment, which apparently a few emails and one visit don't qualify as. We could send a cease and desist, but that's just a letter. It has no legal teeth. So basically, we wait for him to do something worse? Basically. She stared out at the dark yard. I'm sorry. I never wanted my mess to become your mess. Stop apologizing for him. Ethan set down his beer. This isn't your fault. It feels like my fault. I married him. I stayed for 8 years. I should have seen what he was sooner. You were young, and he was good at manipulation. That's not a reflection on you. Lena turned to look at him. He texted you, didn't he? Something about there being two sides to the story. How did you know? Because that's his move. Plant doubt. Make you question what I've told you. Next, he'll probably tell you I was the one who cheated, or I stole from him, or some other lie designed to make you wonder if I'm actually the villain. Her voice was bitter. He did the same thing to my friends during the divorce. Half of them stopped talking to me because they believed his version of events. What is his version? That I'm mentally unstable. That I made up the emotional abuse. That the vasectomy was a mutual decision I later regretted and blamed him for. That he tried everything to save our marriage, but I wanted out because I'm selfish and impulsive. She laughed, hollow. Some of my friends bought it because Marcus is charming and successful and seemed genuinely hurt, and I was a mess. Crying all the time, angry, defensive. I looked crazy. He looked reasonable. I don't believe his version. Even if he seems convincing? Even then. Ethan reached over, took her cold hand in his. I know you, Lena. Not as long as he did, but I know who you are. And nothing he says is going to change that. She squeezed his hand hard. He's going to keep pushing. That's what he does. He pushes until you break or give him what he wants. Then he's going to be disappointed, because I don't break easily. Ethan pulled her closer, and she leaned against him, shivering in the cold. We'll figure this out. Together. Together? She repeated, like she was testing the word. I'm not used to together. No, me neither, but I think we're doing okay so far. They sat there until the cold drove them inside, and then Lena stayed until almost midnight,
neither of them wanting to let go of the small safety they'd created. When she finally left, Ethan stood at the door watching her drive away, feeling the weight of something shifting. They were past the easy part now, past the getting to know you phase where everything was possibility and hope. Now they were in the part where real life crashed in, where the past demanded attention and the future felt uncertain, where love, if that's what this was becoming, had to prove it could survive more than candlelit dinners and soft conversations. Ethan went to his workshop and worked until 2 in the morning, sanding the dining table until his arms ached and his mind finally quieted. The physical work helped, the way it always did. Hands moving, mind settling, the rhythm of creation drowning out the noise of worry. His phone buzzed around 2:30. Lena. Can't sleep. Keep replaying every conversation with Marcus, trying to figure out what he's really after. Ethan wiped sawdust off his hands and typed back, whatever it is, he's not going to get it. How do you know? Because you're stronger than he thinks, and you're not alone anymore. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Then, I love you. I know it's too soon and probably stupid to say, but I do. And I needed you to know before this gets worse. Ethan stared at his phone, at those 3 words that changed everything. He'd been waiting to say them first, waiting for the right moment, the perfect setting. But there was no perfect moment. There was just now, 2:30 in the morning, in a workshop that smelled like sawdust, both of them scared and tired and choosing each other anyway. He typed, I love you too, and we're going to be okay. When he finally went to bed, it was almost 3, and his hands smelled like varnish, and his chest felt light despite everything. Whatever happened next, whatever Marcus tried, they'd face it together. That had to be enough. It turned out that enough was harder than Ethan anticipated. Marcus went quiet for 3 days after that late-night text exchange. 3 days where Ethan and Lena existed in a state of tense waiting, both of them checking their phones constantly, both jumping at unexpected sounds. Then, on a gray Monday morning, Lena's lawyer called with news that made everything exponentially worse. Ethan was dropping Mason off at school when his phone rang. Lena's name on the screen at 8 in the morning meant something was wrong. He's suing me, she said without preamble. Her voice was flat, shock more than anger. Marcus is suing me for the full value of his half of our apartment. Says I coerced him into letting me keep it during the divorce settlement, and now he wants his share. $50,000. Ethan pulled over into a grocery store parking lot, engine still running. Can he do that? According to my lawyer, he can try. It'll probably get dismissed. We had a legally binding settlement agreement, but it'll take months and cost me thousands in legal fees I don't have. She laughed, hollow. That's the point. Not to win. Just to make my life hell until I give him what he actually wants. Which is? Me. Back under his control. Agreeing to see him, talk to him, acknowledge that he still has power over my life. Her breath hitched. And the worst part is it's working. I can't afford this lawsuit. I barely make enough to cover rent and bills. If I have to hire a lawyer for months of litigation, I'll lose everything. Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Around him, Monday morning traffic flowed past. People on their way to work, to school, to normal lives that didn't include vengeful ex-husbands weaponizing the legal system. What did your lawyer say? That we can fight it, that we'll probably win, but probably isn't a guarantee and definitely isn't cheap. She was quiet for a moment. He also said Marcus sent the papers from a firm in the city, high-end corporate litigation, the kind of firm that charges $500 an hour just to read an email. He's trying to intimidate you. It's working. Ethan thought fast. How much do you need? For the lawyer fees? Ethan, no. How much? I'm not taking your money. That's not why I called. I know it's not, but I'm asking anyway. How much? Lena was quiet for so long Ethan thought the call had dropped. Then, my lawyer estimates between $8,000 and $15,000, depending on how long Marcus drags it out. But I can't. I won't take money from you. We've been together for less than 2 months. That's insane. What's insane is letting him bankrupt you out of spite. Ethan put the truck in park, focusing entirely on the conversation. I have savings. Money my dad left me that I've barely touched. Let me help. And then what? We break up in 6 months and you resent me for it? Or we stay together and you hold it over me every time we fight?
Her voice cracked. I can't owe you like that. I can't owe anyone like that. Not again. Ethan understood. Understood that for Lena, accepting help felt like giving up control, like sliding back into the dynamic that had nearly destroyed her. But understanding didn't change the reality of the situation. It's not a loan, he said. It's not something you'd owe me. It's just letting someone care about you enough to help when you need it. That's how it starts. That's exactly how Marcus started. Helping with my student loans, my car payments, my rent. And then suddenly I owed him everything. My choices, my time, my whole life. She was crying now, trying to hide it and failing. I can't do that again, even with you, especially with you. Lena, I need to go. My lawyer's calling back in 10 minutes. She took a shaky breath. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have dumped this on you. I just needed to tell someone. Don't apologize. And don't make any decisions yet. Just think about it, okay? She agreed. But Ethan could hear in her voice that her mind was already made up. They hung up, and he sat in the parking lot watching people come and go from the grocery store, feeling helpless in a way he hadn't felt since Vanessa left. Back then, he couldn't make her stay. Now, he couldn't make Lena let him help. Different situations, same powerlessness. He drove to his workshop on autopilot, barely remembering the route. The dining table sat waiting, nearly finished. He picked up his tools and tried to work, but his hands were shaking too badly to do anything precise. After 20 minutes of accomplishing nothing, he set everything down and called Ben. You okay? Ben answered. You never called during the day. I need advice. About Lena? How'd you know? Because you only sound like this when it's about her. Ben's voice shifted to serious. What happened? Ethan explained the situation. Marcus, the lawsuit, Lena's refusal to accept help. Ben listened without interrupting, which meant it was bad enough that even his chronically optimistic friend didn't have easy answers. That's rough, Ben said when Ethan finished. And I get why she won't take your money. She's scared of the strings. There are no strings. You know that, I know that, but she's been burned bad from the sound of it. Ben paused. You remember when Sarah and I first got together? How she wouldn't let me pay for anything? Wouldn't even let me buy her coffee. Yeah. That was because her ex used to track every penny he spent on her, throw it in her face whenever they argued, made her feel like she owed him for existing. Ben's voice went soft. It took her almost a year to accept that I wasn't keeping score, that I helped because I wanted to, not because I expected something back. A year? At least. And even now, sometimes she gets weird about it. Old habits die hard. Ben sighed. My point is, you can't force this. You can offer, make it clear the offer stands, but ultimately she has to decide she trusts you enough. And that might take longer than you want. I don't have a year. This lawsuit is happening now. Then she'll handle it now, on her own terms. And your job is to support that, even if it's not the way you'd choose. Ben's tone turned pointed. You can't fix this for her, man. You can only stand beside her while she fixes it herself. Ethan knew Ben was right. Hated it, but knew it. What if she can't fix it? What if Marcus wins just by making it too expensive to fight? Then you support her through that, too. That's what love is. Not solving all the problems, just being there when the problems can't be solved. They talked for a few more minutes, Ben sharing stories about Sarah's recovery from her own toxic relationship. The small ways trust built over time. When they hung up, Ethan felt marginally better. Not fixed, but less desperate. Less like he had to do something right now or watch everything fall apart. He went back to work on the dining table, focused on the grain of the wood, the smooth motion of sanding, the small satisfaction of watching rough surfaces become smooth. His phone stayed silent for the rest of the morning. Around noon, Ellen called to ask if he'd be home for lunch. He said yes, even though he hadn't planned on it, because his mother's pot roast sounded better than eating alone in his workshop. Mason was at school, so it was just Ethan and Ellen at the kitchen table, eating in comfortable quiet. His mother had a way of knowing when to push and when to just let him be. Today she let him be, passing him bread without comment, refilling his water glass when it ran low. You want to talk about it? She asked finally, halfway through the meal. Not really. Fair enough. She took a bite of pot roast, chewed thoughtfully. But I'm here if you change your mind. Ethan set down his fork. How did you know Dad was worth it?
Worth the risk. Ellen smiled, that small, sad smile she got whenever Ethan's father came up. I didn't. Not for sure. But I knew that living scared was worse than risking heartbreak. So I jumped. She looked at him directly. You're asking the wrong question, honey. It's not whether she's worth the risk. It's whether you're brave enough to take it. What if I screw it up? Then you screw it up. You apologize, you learn, you try again. She reached across the table, squeezed his hand. Your father and I had a terrible fight about 6 months into dating. He wanted to move to California for a job opportunity, and I refused to leave. We didn't speak for 2 weeks. I never knew that. Because we worked through it. He turned down the job, stayed here, and we built a life. Was it the right choice? I don't know, but it was our choice together. She let go of his hand. The point is, love isn't about never fighting or never making mistakes. It's about choosing each other even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Ethan thought about Lena, about her fear and his helplessness, and the space between what he wanted to do and what she'd let him do. What if she won't let me help? Then you respect that, and you find other ways to be there. Ellen stood, started clearing dishes. She's not asking you to fix everything. She's asking you to stay. Those are different things. The afternoon passed slowly. Ethan finished the dining table, delivered it to his client, came home to an empty house. Mason had soccer practice after school, Ellen was at her book club, and the silence felt oppressive. He tried calling Lena but got voicemail, tried texting and got nothing back. By 7 o'clock, worry had shifted to mild panic. Then his doorbell rang. Lena stood on his porch looking exhausted. Her eyes were red, her hair was a mess, and she was holding a bottle of cheap wine like a lifeline. Ethan stepped aside without a word, and she walked into his living room and sank onto the couch. I met with Marcus, she said. Ethan's stomach dropped. When? This afternoon. He called and said if I'd just talked to him face to face, he'd drop the lawsuit. She laughed bitterly. I knew it was a trap, knew it. But I went anyway because $15,000 in legal fees is more than I make in half a year. Where did you meet? Coffee shop, public place, lots of witnesses. I'm not completely stupid. She set the wine bottle on the coffee table. He spent an hour telling me how concerned he was, how he only filed the lawsuit to get my attention, how he still cares about me and wants to make sure I'm okay. And I told him to go to hell. She looked at Ethan, and there was something fierce in her expression beneath the exhaustion. I told him I didn't care about the money or the apartment or any of it, that I'd rather lose everything than give him one more second of control over my life. What did he say? That I was being dramatic, that I clearly needed help, professional help, and he knew a great therapist who specialized in emotional regulation. She laughed again, sharp. He made me sound crazy, made himself sound concerned and reasonable. And I sat there realizing that anyone listening would think he was the good guy and I was the unstable ex-wife having a breakdown. Ethan crossed to the couch, sat beside her. You're not unstable. I feel unstable. I feel like I'm losing my mind. She pressed her palms against her eyes. The worst part is, there was just a second where I thought about agreeing, about saying yes to coffee dates and check-ins and letting him back into my life piece by piece, just to make this stop. But you didn't. But I didn't. She dropped her hands. I walked out, told him to have his lawyer contact mine, and then I sat in my car for 20 minutes shaking because I knew I'd just made everything worse. You made it clear where you stand. That's not making it worse, isn't it? Now he's going to push harder, drag this lawsuit out longer, find new ways to make my life miserable. She turned to face him. And I'm going to lose, Ethan. Maybe not legally, but financially. I can't afford to fight him. Even if I win the case, I lose. So we find another way? There is no other way. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Her voice rose, frustration bleeding through. I can't take your money. I can't ask my family. They don't have anything to give. I can't get a loan because my credit's already maxed from the divorce. There's no other way except to fight and go bankrupt. Or give up and let him win. Ethan thought fast. What if we don't fight the lawsuit? What if we give him what he's actually asking for? The apartment money? No, attention, control, the feeling that he still matters in your life. Ethan stood up, started pacing.
He doesn't actually want $50,000. He wants you to acknowledge him, to engage with him, to prove he still has power. So what, I just talk to him? Let him think he's winning? No. We take away what he actually wants. Ethan stopped pacing, faced her. You file a restraining order, not because of the lawsuit, that's civil court, but because of the harassment, the showing up at your apartment, the phone calls, the texts. You document everything and make it clear that any contact, any at all, will result in legal consequences. My lawyer said we didn't have enough for a restraining order. That was before he sued you just to force you into a meeting, before he cornered you at a coffee shop to manipulate you. That's a pattern. Ethan crouched in front of her. He's counting on you being too tired, too broke, too scared to keep fighting. But what if we call his bluff? What if we make it so he can't contact you at all, and suddenly his lawsuit is just about money? Money he probably doesn't even need? Lena stared at him. You think he'd drop it? I think he'd lose interest. Lawsuits are expensive for both sides. If he can't use it as leverage to get to you, why bother? Ethan took her hands. We document everything, every text, every call, every encounter. We build a case for harassment that's separate from the lawsuit, and we make it clear you're done playing his games. That could make him angrier? Probably. But angry from a legal distance is better than angry and in your life. Lena was quiet for a long moment, thinking. I'd need to talk to my lawyer, see if it's even possible. Talk to your lawyer. Get a second opinion if you need to. But Lena, you can't keep living like this, waiting for the other shoe to drop, wondering what he'll do next. At some point, you have to draw a line. I'm scared. I know, but you're also strong, stronger than you think. He squeezed her hands. And you're not alone. Whatever happens, I'm here. She pulled him into a hug, holding on tight. Ethan wrapped his arms around her and felt her trembling. Not from cold this time, but from the weight of carrying this alone for so long. He wanted to tell her it would be okay, that everything would work out, but he'd learned that easy promises didn't help. What helped was showing up, being present, holding on when holding on was all you could do. They stayed like that until the front door opened and Mason burst in, soccer bag slung over one shoulder, talking before he was even fully inside. Dad, Jamie's mom said I can go to his birthday party next weekend and they're doing laser tag and pizza and... He stopped, seeing Lena on the couch. Oh, hi, Lena. Hi, Mason. Lena pulled back from Ethan, wiping her eyes quickly. Mason looked between them, too perceptive as always. Are you sad? A little, but I'm okay. Dad makes good hot chocolate when people are sad, with the tiny marshmallows. Mason dropped his soccer bag by the stairs. Want some? Lena smiled, real affection in it. That sounds perfect. Mason ran to the kitchen, already pulling out mugs and the hot chocolate mix. Ethan followed, helping him reach the marshmallows on the top shelf. They made 3 cups, extra marshmallows and Mason's, because of course, and brought them back to the living room. Mason settled on the couch next to Lena, telling her about soccer practice and how he almost scored a goal, but the goalie was really tall. Lena listened, asking questions, laughing at his dramatic reenactment of a near miss. Ethan watched them and felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just about him and Lena anymore. It was about Mason, too. About the family they were becoming, whether they'd meant to or not. After hot chocolate, Mason went upstairs to do homework. Ellen came home and immediately disappeared to her room, giving them space. Ethan and Lena sat in the living room as evening turned to night, not talking much, just being together. I'll call my lawyer tomorrow, Lena said eventually. Ask about the restraining order, see what our options are. Okay? And I need to tell you something. She turned to face him. When I met with Marcus today, he asked about you. Wanted to know how serious we were, how long we'd been together. I think he's trying to find ways to use you against me. Ethan's jaw tightened. Let him try. I'm serious. He'll look for weaknesses, ways to make you doubt me or doubt us. He's good at that. I don't doubt us. Not yet. But he'll plant seeds, make you question my version of events, wonder if I'm really as innocent as I claim. She looked away. He told me today that I was poisoning you against him, that I was playing the victim to manipulate you into taking my side. That's projection. I know, but it works. That's the thing about gaslighting. Even when you know it's happening, it still gets in your head. She looked back at him. Promise me something? Anything. If he contacts you again, if he says things that make you doubt me, come talk to me about it. Don't sit with it alone. Don't let him twist things in your head. Her voice was urgent. That's how he wins. By isolating people, making them question themselves until they don't know what's real anymore. I promise. She leaned against him, and they sat there in the dim living room, the only sound the old house settling around them. Ethan thought about promises and trust and the choice to believe someone even when the world was telling you not to. Thought about his mother's words, love is choosing each other when it's hard. This was hard. Harder than anything he'd dealt with since his divorce. But Lena was worth it. They were worth it. Around 10, Lena said she should go. Ethan walked her to her car, the November night sharp and clear. Stars scattered across the sky, bright enough to see despite the streetlights. Thank you, she said, for not running when this got complicated. I'm not going anywhere. People say that. They don't always mean it. I mean it. Ethan pulled her close. Whatever happens with Marcus, whatever he tries, we'll handle it. Together. She kissed him, soft and grateful, then got in her car and drove away. Ethan stood in the driveway, watching her taillights disappear, feeling the cold seep through his jacket. Inside, the house was warm and lit, his family waiting, his life imperfect and messy and real. He went inside and found Mason still awake, sitting on his bed with Dr. Trunk. Is Lena okay? Mason asked. Ethan sat beside him. She's dealing with some hard stuff, but she'll be okay. Is it because of her mean ex-husband? Ethan's eyebrows went up. How do you know about that? I heard you and Grandma talking. You said he was making trouble. Mason hugged Dr. Trunk. Jamie's dad's ex-wife made trouble too, tried to take Jamie away, but the judge said no, and now she can't. The situations are a little different, bud. But you're going to protect Lena, right? Like Jamie's dad protected Jamie? Ethan thought about how to answer that. I'm going to support her while she protects herself. That's different from protecting someone. It means standing beside them while they fight their own battles. Mason considered this. Can't you fight for her? Not this battle. This one she has to fight herself. But I can make sure she doesn't fight alone. Oh. Mason was quiet for a moment. I like Lena. I hope her ex-husband leaves her alone. Me too, bud. Me too. He tucked Mason in and went to his own room. Sleep didn't come easily. He kept replaying the conversation with Lena, thinking about Marcus and lawsuits and restraining orders, thinking about what came next and whether they were strong enough to handle it. His phone buzzed around midnight. Lena. Talk to my lawyer. She thinks we have enough for a restraining order. Filing tomorrow. Ethan wrote back. Good. How are you feeling? Scared, but also relieved. Like finally I'm doing something instead of just reacting. That's what matters. A pause, then, I love you. Even with all this mess. Especially with all this mess, he replied. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Then, come over tomorrow. I need to see you. I'll be there. Ethan set down his phone and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, Lena would file the restraining order. Tomorrow, they'd take the first real step toward ending Marcus's harassment. Tomorrow, things might get worse before they got better. But they'd face it together. That had to be enough. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday. Lena had to present evidence of harassment, the emails, texts, the uninvited visit to her apartment, the manipulative coffee meeting. Her lawyer seemed confident, but confidence didn't guarantee success. The days leading up to it were tense. Marcus went quiet again, which somehow felt more ominous than his active harassment. Lena barely slept, barely ate. Ethan spent every free moment with her, bringing food she didn't eat, sitting with her while she paced her apartment, listening to her rehearse what she'd say to the judge. What if he brings up the divorce, she asked Tuesday night, the evening before the hearing. What if he makes me sound like the unstable one? Then you tell the truth, that he manipulated you, controlled you, and is continuing to harass you even now. Ethan was sitting on her couch surrounded by art supplies she'd bought weeks ago and still hadn't touched. The evidence is on your side. Evidence can be interpreted different ways. Not when it's a dozen emails and texts after you asked him to stop. Not when he showed up at your home uninvited. Ethan reached for her hand as she paced past. You've got this. She stopped. Let him pull her down to sit beside him. What if I don't? Then we appeal. We try again. We don't give up.
I'm tired of fighting. I know. But you're almost there. One more day, then it's out of your hands. The judge decides, and whatever happens, you did everything you could. Lena leaned against him, exhausted. Will you come to the hearing? If you want me there, I want you there. I need you there. She lifted her head to look at him. Is that too much? Asking you to take a day off work to sit in a courtroom for my mess? It's not too much, and it's not your mess.
It's something happening to you that you're dealing with. Ethan kissed her forehead. I'll be there, front row. She smiled, small and tired. Thank you. They spent the night at her apartment, neither of them sleeping much. Ethan held her while she tossed and turned, whispering reassurances that felt inadequate but were all he had to give. When dawn finally came, gray and cold through her windows, they both gave up on sleep and made coffee neither of them wanted. The courthouse was downtown, old and imposing, with marble floors and echoing hallways. Lena's lawyer met them outside, a woman in her 50s named Patricia Chen, who had a reputation for not backing down. She went over the procedure one more time, reminded Lena to stay calm and stick to the facts, then led them into the courtroom. Marcus was already there. Ethan saw him before Lena did, a man in his early 40s, expensive suit, dark hair graying at the temples. Handsome in that corporate way, confident posture, relaxed expression. He looked like someone who'd never worried about money or power or getting what he wanted. When he saw Lena, his expression shifted to something that might have been concern if you didn't know to look for the calculation underneath. Lena's hand tightened on Ethan's arm. That's him. I figured. They sat on the opposite side of the courtroom. Marcus's lawyer was there too, younger guy with slicked back hair and a smug expression. The judge entered, an older woman with gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, and everyone stood. The hearing began. Patricia presented their evidence methodically. The timeline of harassment, starting with the emails after Lena had made it clear she wanted no contact, the visit to her apartment, the phone calls, the lawsuit filed not because of legitimate financial dispute, but to force Lena into meeting with him, the coffee shop encounter where Marcus had cornered her under the guise of concern. Marcus's lawyer countered with his own narrative. Marcus was simply trying to resolve legitimate financial issues from their divorce. He was concerned about his ex-wife's well-being and wanted to ensure she was okay. Any contact had been motivated by care, not harassment. The lawsuit was a separate civil matter and shouldn't be conflated with this hearing. Ethan watched the judge's face, trying to read her reaction. She was impossible to read. Professional, attentive, giving nothing away. Then Lena had to testify. She walked to the stand with her head high, was sworn in, and sat down. Patricia asked her questions. When had the harassment started? How had it made her feel? What impact had it had on her life? Lena answered clearly, her voice steady, even though Ethan could see her hands shaking in her lap. Ms. Hart, Patricia said, can you describe the nature of your relationship with Mr. Hartley during your marriage? Lena took a breath. It was controlling. He made decisions about my career, my friendships, my appearance. When I disagreed, he'd make me feel like I was being difficult or unreasonable. Over time, I stopped disagreeing, stopped having opinions. I became whatever version of myself he wanted because it was easier than fighting. And when you decided to divorce? He told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life, that I'd never find anyone else who'd tolerate me, that I was too broken to be loved. Her voice wavered, but didn't break. For a long time, I believed him. Marcus's lawyer stood for cross-examination. Ms. Hart, isn't it true that you suffer from anxiety and depression? I have anxiety. I see a therapist for it. And isn't it possible that your perception of Mr. Hartley's behavior is colored by your mental health struggles? Lena's jaw tightened. My anxiety is a result of years of emotional abuse, not the cause of my perception. But you admit you have mental health issues that affect your judgment. Objection, Patricia said sharply. Counsel is attempting to discredit the petitioner based on her mental health history, which is both inappropriate and irrelevant. Sustained, the judge said. Move on, counselor. The cross-examination continued, Marcus's lawyer trying to poke holes in Lena's timeline, suggesting she was exaggerating or misremembering. But Lena held firm, answering each question calmly, referring to the documented evidence when challenged. When she stepped down, Ethan could see she was shaking. She sat beside him, and he took her hand under the table, squeezing gently. Then Marcus testified. He was smooth, practiced, expressed concern for Lena's well-being, said he only wanted to ensure she was stable and safe, claimed the lawsuit was a legitimate financial dispute that had nothing to do with harassment, admitted to contacting her but framed it as care, not control. "Mr. Hartley," Patricia said during her cross-examination, "how many times did you contact Ms. Hart after she explicitly asked you to stop?" "I don't recall her explicitly asking me to stop. Your Honor, I'd like to present Exhibit G, an email from Ms. Hart dated October 15th, where she clearly states, 'Please do not contact me again for any reason. All communication should go through our lawyers.'" The judge examined the email. "Mr. Hartley, you received this email?" Marcus barely hesitated. "Yes, but I interpreted it as temporary frustration, not a genuine request for no contact." "And the subsequent 12 emails you sent after this date?" "I was concerned, making sure she was okay." "Despite her clear request that you stop?" Marcus's smooth demeanor cracked slightly. "I was trying to help." The hearing lasted almost 3 hours. By the end, Ethan's back hurt from the hard wooden benches, and Lena looked ready to collapse. The judge reviewed the evidence one more time, asked a few final questions, then announced she'd issue her ruling within 48 hours. They filed out of the courtroom in silence. In the hallway, Marcus approached them, his lawyer trailing behind. "Lena," he said, "can we talk? Privately?" "No," Lena said. "I just want to—" She said no. Ethan stepped forward, positioning himself slightly between them. "Leave her alone." Marcus's eyes flicked to Ethan, assessing. "You must be the new boyfriend. Lena, did you tell him about your history of—" "Walk away," Patricia said sharply, appearing at Lena's other side. "Right now, or I'll file a contempt motion before we're out of the building." Marcus held up his hands in a gesture of surrender, but the smile on his face was cold. "Just trying to help. Take care of yourself, Lena." He walked away, his lawyer following. Lena stood frozen, breathing hard. "Come on," Patricia said gently. "Let's get out of here." They left through a side exit to avoid any further encounters. Outside, the November day was bright and cold, the contrast with the courthouse's dim interior almost shocking. Patricia went over next steps. Wait for the ruling, don't respond to any contact from Marcus, document anything new that happened. When she left, Ethan and Lena stood on the courthouse steps, neither quite ready to move yet. "I couldn't breathe in there," Lena said. "Every time he talked, every time his lawyer tried to make me sound crazy, I couldn't breathe." "You did great. You were calm and clear and you didn't let them rattle you." "I felt rattled. I felt like I was going to throw up or pass out or scream." She turned to him. "How do you do that? Stay so calm." "I'm not calm. I'm furious. But being furious doesn't help you right now." Ethan pulled her into a hug, right there on the courthouse steps with people flowing around them. 2 days. Then we know. What if she sides with him? Then we figure out what's next. But Lena, you heard the same hearing I did. The evidence is on your side. She held on to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting. "Take me home, not my apartment, your home. I need to be somewhere that feels safe." "Okay." They drove back to Ethan's house in separate cars. Inside, Ellen had coffee ready and disappeared tactfully to give them space. Mason was at school, the house quiet and warm. Lena curled up on the couch and promptly fell asleep, exhaustion winning out over anxiety. Ethan sat beside her, watching her sleep, thinking about the hearing and Marcus's cold smile and the way the system required you to relive your trauma just to be protected from it. He thought about Lena testifying, her voice steady even as she described being controlled and diminished. Thought about her strength, the kind that didn't come from never being hurt, but from surviving it and still showing up. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You have no idea what you're getting into. She's not who you think she is." Marcus. Still trying to plant doubt, even now. Ethan deleted it without responding and turned off his phone. Whatever Marcus wanted to say, whatever seeds he wanted to plant, Ethan wasn't interested. He knew who Lena was, knew her fears and her strength and her complicated history, knew her and loved her anyway. That's what mattered. 2 days later, the ruling came through. The restraining order was granted. Marcus was prohibited from contacting Lena directly or indirectly for 1 year. He couldn't call, text, email, or show up at her home or workplace. Any violation would result in immediate legal consequences. The judge's written opinion cited the pattern of harassment, the clear evidence of Lena requesting no contact, and Marcus's continued disregard of those requests. They won. Lena cried when Patricia called with the news, sat on Ethan's couch, and sobbed with relief and disbelief, and the weight of a year of fear finally lifting. Ethan held her and let her cry, let her release everything she'd been holding in. "It's over," she kept saying. "It's actually over." "It's over," Ethan confirmed. The lawsuit was still pending, but without the ability to contact Lena directly, Marcus's interest seemed to wane. 2 weeks later, his lawyer filed a motion to dismiss, claiming they'd discovered new information about the divorce settlement that made their case moot. Patricia suspected he just didn't want to waste money on litigation he couldn't use as leverage, but the reason didn't matter. The lawsuit was dropped. It was over. Really, truly over. The week after the lawsuit was dropped, Lena showed up at Ethan's workshop carrying a canvas that was almost as tall as she was. Her face was streaked with paint, blue on her left cheek, yellow on her right hand, and she was grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "I painted," she announced, propping the canvas against his workbench. "Actually painted, for 6 hours straight. I didn't even stop to eat." Ethan set down his sanding block and walked over to look. The canvas was covered in bold strokes of color, blues and greens and deep purples that seemed to move even when standing still. Abstract, chaotic, beautiful in a way that defied explanation. "It's incredible," he said. "It's terrible. The composition's all wrong, the color balance is a mess, and I have no idea what I was even trying to say." She was still grinning. "But I made it. I actually made something." Ethan pulled her into a hug, not caring about the paint that was definitely getting on his work shirt. "I'm proud of you." "I'm proud of me too." She pulled back, looking up at him. "I forgot what this felt like. The part where you lose track of time because you're so absorbed in creating something. The part where your hands hurt and your back aches, and you don't care because you're exactly where you're supposed to be." "Welcome back." "Thank you for pushing me to try again. I don't think I would have without you." Ethan thought about denying it, deflecting the credit the way he usually did, but maybe it was okay to accept that he'd helped. That being there for someone, encouraging them, sometimes made a difference. "You would have found your way back eventually," he said. "I just helped speed up the timeline." They spent the afternoon in his workshop, Lena watching him work while she sketched in a notebook she'd started carrying everywhere. Mason came home from school and demanded to see her painting, declared it super cool with the absolute confidence of a 7-year-old art critic, then dragged her upstairs to show her his latest Lego creation. Ellen made dinner, pot roast again, because apparently that was the only thing she knew how to make when she was nervous. And they all sat around the kitchen table like they'd done this 100 times before. Easy. Natural. Like Lena had always been part of this family. After dinner, Mason lobbied hard for Lena to stay for movie night. Ellen seconded the motion. Ethan looked at Lena, raising his eyebrows in question, and she nodded. They watched some animated movie about talking animals that Mason loved and the adults tolerated. Halfway through, Mason fell asleep with his head on Lena's lap, and she absently played with his hair while pretending to watch the screen. Ethan looked at them and felt something settle in his chest. This was what he'd been afraid to hope for, this exact moment, this exact feeling. After the movie, Ethan carried Mason up to bed. When he came back down, Ellen had already disappeared to her room and Lena was washing dishes, even though she'd been told repeatedly that she didn't have to. "He's a great kid," she said when Ethan entered the kitchen. "He really likes you." "I really like him." She rinsed a plate, set it in the rack. "Is that weird? That I'm getting attached to your son after only a few months?" "No, it's honest." Ethan picked up a towel and started drying. "Does it scare you?" "Terrifies me. What if we don't work out? What if I end up being someone who was in his life and then wasn't? I don't want to be another person who leaves him." "You're not going to leave." "You don't know that. I know you. And I know you wouldn't let yourself get this close to Mason if you weren't serious about staying." He set down a dried plate. "But for the record, I'm not planning on letting you go. So unless you're planning on running, I think we're stuck with each other. Lena smiled, small and genuine. Stuck with each other. Romantic. I try. They finished the dishes in comfortable silence. Outside, December wind rattled the windows, the first real cold snap of winter. Inside, the house was warm and full of the small sounds of family. The old heater kicking on, Ellen's television murmuring through her closed door, the refrigerator humming. Stay tonight, Ethan said. It's late, and it's cold, and I don't want you driving home. Lena looked at him, something careful in her expression. We've been taking it slow. I know, I'm not suggesting. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, suddenly awkward. The guest room. You can stay in the guest room. I just want you here. The guest room is your mom's room. She has the master. There's another room upstairs. Used to be my brother's before he moved out. He was definitely blushing now. It has a bed and sheets. Clean sheets. Lena laughed. Okay, I'll stay. She borrowed one of Ethan's old t-shirts and a pair of sweatpants that were too long on her. Got ready for bed in the upstairs bathroom, while Ethan checked on Mason one more time, adjusted his blankets, made sure Dr. Trunk was still tucked under his arm. When he passed the guest room, Lena was sitting on the bed, looking around at the space that still had posters from his brother's high school years on the walls. Your brother was into a lot of bands I've never heard of, she said. Jake went through a punk phase. It was painful for everyone involved. Ethan leaned against the doorframe. You comfortable? Need anything? I'm good. She looked at him, and her expression shifted to something more serious. Thank you. For everything. The restraining order, the lawsuit, all of it. I couldn't have gotten through it without you. You could have. But I'm glad you didn't have to. I love you. She said it simply, like it was just a fact. I know I said it before, but I'm saying it again now that things aren't actively falling apart. I love you. Ethan crossed the room and kissed her, soft and slow. When he pulled back, he said, I love you too. And I'm not going anywhere. Good, because I'm pretty sure Mason would be more upset about losing me than losing you at this point. Probably true. He kissed her again, then made himself leave before he did something stupid like suggest she didn't actually need the guest room. They'd been taking it slow for good reasons. Her recovery from Marcus, his fear of rushing into something that fell apart. Both of them wanting to build something solid before adding physical intimacy to the mix. Tonight wasn't the night to change that. But soon, definitely soon. Ethan went to his own room and lay awake for a while, thinking about the future in concrete terms for the first time in years. Where this was going, what it might look like, whether Lena would eventually move in, whether they'd get married, whether Mason would get the sibling he occasionally asked about. Big questions that used to terrify him, but now just felt like possibilities worth exploring. He fell asleep smiling. The next morning, Mason discovered Lena at breakfast and was absolutely delighted. Are you staying forever? He asked through a mouthful of cereal. Just for breakfast, Lena said. You should stay forever. Mason, Ethan warned. What? I'm just saying. Mason returned to his cereal, then looked up again. But seriously, forever would be cool. Ellen hid her smile behind her coffee mug. Lena blushed. Ethan decided he needed to have a conversation with his son about appropriate versus inappropriate comments. Later, when he could do it without laughing. After breakfast, Lena headed home to change for a client meeting. Ethan drove Mason to school, then went to his workshop to finish a bookshelf order. The work felt different now, lighter, like the weight he'd been carrying for years had finally lifted. He found himself humming while he worked, the way Mason had pointed out weeks ago. Found himself thinking about the future instead of dwelling on the past. Around lunch, his phone rang. Unknown number again. He almost didn't answer, assuming it was a spam call, but something made him pick up. Ethan Cole? A woman's voice, professional and crisp. Yeah? This is Jennifer Martinez. I'm an attorney representing Marcus Hartley in a potential defamation case. Ethan's good mood evaporated instantly. What? Mr. Hartley believes that false statements have been made about him during the recent restraining order proceedings. Statements that have damaged his reputation and professional standing. A pause. We're calling as a courtesy to inform you that you may be named as a co-defendant given your involvement in the situation. That's bullshit. Everything said in that hearing was true and documented. That's for a court to determine. We'll be filing within the next 30 days. You should consult with an attorney. She hung up before Ethan could respond. He stood there, phone in hand, feeling like he'd been punched. This couldn't be happening. They'd won the restraining order. The lawsuit had been dropped. Marcus was supposed to be gone from their lives, but apparently he'd just found a new weapon. Ethan called Lena immediately. She answered on the second ring, and he could hear traffic in the background. She was driving. "Marcus is suing us for defamation," he said without preamble. The traffic sounds continued. Then, "What?" He explained the phone call, the attorney's veiled threat, the 30-day timeline. Lena was silent through all of it, and when he finished, he heard her pull over, the engine cutting off. "He's never going to stop," she said, and her voice was completely flat. "Is he? This is just going to keep happening. New lawsuits, new harassment, new ways to make our lives hell. Forever." "We'll fight this too, but with what, Ethan? I'm already broke from the last round of legal fees. You've already put your life on hold for my drama. How many times can we keep doing this before we break?" "As many times as it takes." "No." She laughed, bitter and tired. "No, that's not fair to you, to Mason, to your life. You didn't sign up for this." "I signed up for you. This comes with it." "Maybe it shouldn't. Maybe I should—" She stopped, took a shaky breath. "Maybe you should walk away. Find someone without a psychotic ex-husband who's determined to destroy anyone who gets close to me." "Lena, I'm serious. I can't drag you through this again. I can't watch you spend money you don't have and time you can't afford just to deal with my mess. It's not fair." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "Don't do this. Don't let him win by pushing me away." "I'm not pushing you away. I'm protecting you." "I don't need protecting. I need you to trust that I'm here because I choose to be. Not because I'm trapped or obligated, but because I love you and I'm not walking away from a fight." She was crying now. He could hear it in her breathing. "I'm so tired, Ethan. I'm so tired of fighting." "I know, but you don't have to fight alone." He sat down on his workbench, phone pressed to his ear. "Come over, right now. Skip the client meeting. Just come over and we'll figure this out together." "I can't just—" "Yes, you can. Call your client, reschedule, and come over. Please." A long pause. Then, "Okay, give me 20 minutes." She arrived in 15, her eyes red but dry. Ethan met her at the door and pulled her into the workshop, away from the house where Mason might overhear. They sat on the floor, backs against the workbench, and Lena told him everything the attorney had said when she'd called her next. "Patricia says it's a nuisance suit, designed to intimidate, not to win." Lena picked at a splinter in the floor. "But it'll still cost thousands to defend, and even if we win, Marcus can just file something else. And something else. He has unlimited resources. We don't. So we find a different approach." "What approach?" "We got the restraining order. We defended against his lawsuit." "What's left?" Ethan thought about it, really thought. They'd been playing defense this whole time, reacting to Marcus's moves. But what if they went on offense? What if they made him the one reacting? "We expose him," Ethan said slowly. "What?" "We document everything he's done. The harassment, the frivolous lawsuits, the manipulation. We file a complaint with the Bar Association. Lawyers aren't allowed to abuse the court system to harass people. If we can show a pattern, if we can prove he's weaponizing litigation, he could face professional consequences." Lena stared at him. "That could work. Or it could make him angrier. He's already as angry as he's going to get. The only question is whether we keep letting him push us around or push back." Ethan took her hand. "I'm not saying it'll be easy. I'm not saying it'll work. But I'm saying we try. One more time, and if this doesn't stop him, we'll figure out something else. But we don't give up, and we definitely don't walk away from each other." She squeezed his hand hard. "You're stubborn." "So are you. That's why we work." Lena laughed, a real laugh that broke through the tears. Okay, one more fight. But after this, if he's still coming after us, we're moving to Alaska or something, somewhere without cell service." "Deal." They called Patricia and explained the plan. She was skeptical, but agreed to help them gather evidence and file the bar complaint. It would take time, weeks, maybe months, but it was something proactive, something that put Marcus on the defensive for once. Over the next 2 weeks, they compiled everything, every email, every text, every documented interaction. Patricia interviewed friends of Lena's who'd witnessed Marcus's behavior during the marriage. They got affidavits from neighbors who'd seen him show up at Lena's apartment uninvited. They built a case that showed a clear pattern of harassment and abuse of the legal system. The bar complaint was filed on a Thursday in mid-December. The same day, Patricia sent a strongly worded letter to Marcus's defamation attorney outlining the bar complaint and suggesting that perhaps Mr. Hartley should reconsider filing yet another frivolous lawsuit when he was already under professional investigation. 2 days later, the defamation suit was quietly withdrawn. Marcus's attorney claimed they'd reassessed the merits of the case and decided not to proceed. Patricia said it was because they knew they'd lose and didn't want the Bar Association looking too closely at Marcus's pattern of behavior. Either way, it was done. Really, truly, finally done. This time, there was no threat of another lawsuit, no ominous silence that felt like a storm brewing. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that actually felt peaceful instead of ominous. Lena cried when Patricia called with the news, but this time it was pure relief. She came over that evening and hugged everyone. Ethan, Ellen, even Mason, who was confused about what was happening but happy to participate in the group hug anyway. "It's really over?" Mason asked when Lena finally let go. "It's really over," Lena confirmed. "Good. Can we have pizza to celebrate?" They had pizza and breadsticks and ice cream for dessert because apparently big victories required excessive amounts of food. Mason talked nonstop about his upcoming winter break, his Christmas wish list, his plans to build the world's biggest snowman if it ever actually snowed. Ellen told stories about Ethan as a kid, embarrassing ones that made him groan and Lena laugh. It was loud and chaotic and exactly what they all needed. After dinner, after Mason was in bed, after Ellen had retired to her room, Ethan and Lena sat on the porch despite the cold. The December night was clear and sharp, stars brilliant overhead, their breath fogging in the air. "What happens now?" Lena asked. "What do you mean?" "We spent months dealing with Marcus, fighting, surviving, just trying to get through each day. Now that's done. What do we do with all this space?" Ethan thought about it. "We live. We build the life we actually want instead of the one we're forced to have." "What does that look like?" "I don't know, but I'd like to find out." He turned to face her. "Move in with me." Lena's eyes went wide. "What?" "Move in. You're here half the time anyway. Mason adores you. My mom adores you. I adore you. And I'm tired of watching you leave every night." "Ethan, we've only been together for 4 months. 5 almost. And I don't care about timelines or what we're supposed to do. I care about building a life with you." He took her cold hands in his. "I know it's fast. I know there are probably 100 reasons to wait. But I also know that I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want Mason to have you around all the time, not just for visits. I want us to be a real family, not just people who see each other between crises." "Your mom lives here." "She's planning to move out in the spring, buying a condo with her friend Patricia from book club. She's been waiting to make sure I'd be okay, but I'm pretty sure she's ready." Ethan squeezed Lena's hands. "There's room for you here, if you want it." Lena stared at him, emotions flickering across her face, too fast to name. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of losing myself again. Of becoming someone's live-in girlfriend and forgetting to be my own person." She pulled one hand free to wipe her eyes. "I know you're not Marcus. I know that. But the fear is still there." "Then we make rules, boundaries. You keep your studio space. Actually, we convert the garage into a proper art studio. You keep your independence, your work, your friends. You don't have to change anything about who you are just because you're living here." He paused. "And if it doesn't work, if you feel yourself disappearing again, you tell me. And we figure it out. But we figure it out together." "You'd really build me a studio?" "I'd build you whatever you want. I'm a carpenter. It's kind of my thing." She laughed through tears. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. I love you. You love me. We want to be together. Everything else is just logistics." Lena looked at him for a long moment, and Ethan could see her wrestling with fear and hope, past trauma and future possibility. Then she said, "Okay. Okay? Okay. I'll move in, but I want the studio, a real one, with good lighting and proper ventilation." "Done?" and I keep my apartment for another 2 months just in case. Whatever you need. And we have a weekly check-in where we're honest about how things are going, how we're feeling, whether this is working. Absolutely. She smiled, and it was the first completely unguarded smile he'd seen from her in weeks. We're really doing this. We really are. They kissed on the freezing porch, and then Ethan pulled her inside where it was warm. They stayed up late talking about logistics, when she'd move, what furniture would go where, how to tell Mason in a way that didn't make him so excited he couldn't sleep for a week. Practical, mundane things that felt monumental because they were building something together. Lena ended up staying in the guest room again, but this time it felt different. Temporary. Soon she'd be in his room, in his bed, in his life, in every way that mattered. Ethan lay awake long after she'd gone upstairs, thinking about the path that had led him here. A blind date he hadn't wanted. A connection he hadn't expected. A love that had survived harassment and lawsuits and every possible obstacle. It felt impossible that less than 6 months ago, he'd been convinced love was a one-time thing, something he'd already used up his chance at. He'd been so wrong. They told Mason the next morning over breakfast. He was quiet for about 3 seconds, processing. Then he grinned so wide Ethan thought his face might split. So Lena's going to live here? Forever? Well, not forever, Lena said. But for a long time, yeah. And I can show her my dinosaur books whenever I want? Within reason, Ethan added. And she'll be here for breakfast and dinner and everything? That's the plan. Mason launched himself at Lena, hugging her so hard she almost fell off her chair. This is the best news ever. Wait until I tell Jamie. His dad's girlfriend doesn't even live with them yet. Ethan caught Lena's eye over Mason's head, and they both smiled. Ellen came into the kitchen, saw the group hug, and immediately understood. Well, she said, pouring herself coffee, it's about time. Lena started moving in over the next 2 weeks, a few boxes at a time. She didn't have much. 8 years with Marcus had taught her to travel light emotionally, and that had translated to physical possessions too. But what she did bring transformed the house. Art supplies in the corner of the living room until the studio was ready, her weird coffee mugs in the kitchen, her books on the shelves, mixing with Ethan's woodworking manuals, and Mason's dinosaur encyclopedias. Ethan converted the second garage bay into a studio, installing big windows for natural light, proper ventilation, storage for her supplies. It took him 3 weeks working every spare moment, and when he finally brought Lena out to see it on Christmas Eve, she cried. It's perfect, she said, walking around the space, touching the custom shelves he'd built, the big work table, the north-facing windows. Ethan, this is perfect. Merry Christmas. She kissed him right there in the studio, surrounded by the smell of fresh paint and new wood. I don't have anything this good to give you. You gave me yourself. That's more than enough. They spent Christmas Day at the house, just the 4 of them. Ellen made a turkey that was slightly dry but edible. Mason opened presents at 6 in the morning because waiting until a reasonable hour was apparently impossible. Lena gave him a custom painting of his favorite dinosaur, and Mason declared it the best present he'd ever gotten, which made Vanessa's expensive gifts from last year seem suddenly inadequate. For Ethan, Lena had commissioned a wooden sign for his workshop, Coal Carpentry, building things that last. Simple, perfect, exactly right. I love it, he said. I know you don't technically have a business name, but I thought maybe you should. You're too good at this to just be guy who makes furniture. She smiled. Plus, it's a double meaning, building things that last. Like us. Like us, he agreed. They spent the afternoon playing board games that Mason won through questionable adherence to rules, eating too many cookies, watching It's a Wonderful Life because Ellen insisted and fell asleep halfway through. It was domestic and boring and absolutely perfect. That night, after Mason was asleep and Ellen was in her room, Ethan and Lena lay in his bed, their bed now, and talked about the future in concrete terms. I want to go back to school, Lena said. Take some art classes. Maybe work toward showing in galleries eventually. Do it. It'll be expensive. We'll figure it out. You've got the restraining order settlement. That's for emergencies. This is an investment in your future. That counts. Ethan pulled her closer. What else? I want to travel. Not far. Just day trips. See things. Make art inspired by actual places instead of just my apartment walls. We can do that.
Where do you want to go first? The coast. I haven't seen the ocean in 5 years. Then we'll go to the coast. He kissed the top of her head. What else? I want to paint you, and Mason, and Ellen. I want to make art of the people I love. I'm a terrible model. I fidget. I'll work fast.
They fell asleep talking about possibilities, wrapped around each other, the December wind cold outside but the house warm within. The new year came with surprising gentleness. No dramatic changes, no crisis, just the slow settling into a life they'd chosen. Lena painted in her studio for hours every day, producing work that got stronger with each piece. Ethan took on more custom projects, the kind that challenged him creatively. Mason thrived having Lena around full-time, his anxiety about Ethan being lonely finally easing. Ellen moved out in March, into a sunny condo 10 minutes away. She and Patricia became roommates, hosting book club and game nights and generally living the retirement they'd both earned. The house felt emptier without her, but also more like Ethan and Lena's space. They repainted the master bedroom, moved furniture around, made it theirs. By May, Lena was preparing for her first gallery show in 6 years. Small venue, local artists, nothing fancy. But it was hers. Her work, her vision, her voice, after years of silence. The opening was on a Friday night. Ethan wore the blue shirt Mason had picked out months ago for that first date. Mason wore his best sneakers. Ellen came with Patricia, both of them dressed up and excited. Ben and Sarah showed up, curious to meet the woman who'd transformed their formerly hermit-like friend. Lena's paintings covered 2 walls of the small gallery. Bold, abstract pieces that somehow felt deeply personal. Ethan recognized the colors from that first painting she'd made after Marcus's lawsuit was dropped. But these were more refined, more confident, the work of someone who'd found her voice again. "These are incredible," Sarah said, studying a large canvas of blues and greens. "Like, genuinely incredible. You could sell these for real money." "That's the plan," Lena said, but she was smiling, not defensive. "If anyone actually wants to buy them." They sold 3 pieces that night. Not huge numbers, but enough. Enough to feel like maybe this could be more than a hobby. Maybe this could be her life. On the drive home, Mason fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from staying up past his bedtime. Lena leaned against Ethan in comfortable silence, watching streetlights flash past. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not letting me give up. On my art. On us. On believing I could have a life that didn't revolve around someone else's approval. You did that yourself. I just stood nearby and held the ladder." She smiled. "That's exactly what I needed, though. Someone to hold the ladder while I climbed." They got home around 11. Mason woke up enough to brush his teeth and fall into bed, Dr. Trunk tucked under his arm as always. Ethan and Lena stood in his doorway for a moment, watching him sleep. "He's getting so big," Lena said. "I know. Terrifying. Do you ever think about having more kids?" Ethan looked at her, surprised. "Do you?" "Maybe. Someday. Not now, but..." She shrugged. "I don't know. I always thought I wanted them. Then Marcus made sure that wasn't an option. Now that I'm free to choose again, I'm realizing I still want them. At least one more. If you do." "I do." The answer came easily. No hesitation. "I really do." They went to their room, got ready for bed in comfortable silence. Lena had taken over half the closet, her clothes mixing with his. Her products lined the bathroom counter, her books on the nightstand. Small evidences that this was her home too, not just a place she was staying. In bed, wrapped around each other in the dark, Ethan thought about the future again. About the gallery show and art school and maybe a baby in a year or 2. About Mason growing up with siblings. About Ethan and Lena growing old together, building a life that neither of them had expected but both of them wanted. "Marry me," he said into the darkness. Lena went very still. "What?" "Marry me. Not right now. Whenever you're ready. A year from now, 5 years from now, I don't care. But marry me. Be my wife. Be Mason's mom. Be part of this family officially." She was quiet for so long, Ethan started to panic. Maybe it was too soon. Maybe she wasn't ready for that kind of commitment after everything with Marcus. Maybe he'd pushed too hard, too fast. Then she said, "Yes." Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Not now. I need more time. But yes, definitely yes. She turned in his arms to face him. You're sure? This is a big step. I've never been more sure of anything. Not even about Mason? Not even about Mason, though he's a close second. She laughed and kissed him, and they stayed awake talking about the future until almost 3 in the morning, about what kind of wedding they'd want. Small, probably, just family and close friends, about whether they'd hyphenate their names, about what it would mean to be married after both of them had failed at it once before. It won't be perfect, Lena said. We'll fight. We'll get on each other's nerves. We'll have bad days and bad months. I know. But we'll be honest about it. We'll talk about the hard stuff instead of pretending it doesn't exist. We'll go to therapy if we need to. She paused. We'll probably need to. Probably. And you're still in? Completely in. Ethan pulled her closer. This isn't about perfect. It's about choosing each other even when things get hard, especially when things get hard. They fell asleep finally, as the first light of dawn started creeping through the windows. Ethan's last conscious thought was that he'd been wrong about so many things. Wrong about love being a one-time chance. Wrong about safety being enough. Wrong about needing to protect himself from ever being hurt again. The truth was messier than that. Love wasn't safe. It was risky and vulnerable and sometimes painful. But it was also worth it. Worth the fear, worth the uncertainty, worth the possibility of loss. Because the alternative, living small and protected and alone, wasn't really living at all. 6 months later, on a warm October afternoon, almost exactly a year after their first date, Ethan and Lena got married. The ceremony was small, held in Ethan's backyard, just family and a handful of close friends. Mason served as ring bearer and took the job very seriously. Ellen cried. Ben made a speech that was mostly inappropriate but also genuinely touching. Patricia played piano because apparently she'd been hiding that talent for years. Lena wore a simple white dress she'd found at a vintage shop. Ethan wore a suit that was slightly too tight because he'd gained weight from happiness in Ellen's cooking. They wrote their own vows, promised to be honest and kind and brave with each other, promised to choose love even when it was hard. Marcus didn't show up. The restraining order was still in effect, and he'd apparently moved to another state for a new job. Lena had heard through mutual friends that he'd gotten engaged to someone new, and she'd felt nothing but relief for whoever that woman was, and hoped that she'd see the warning signs faster than Lena had. At the reception, really just a long dinner in the backyard with string lights and too much food, Mason gave a toast that was mostly about how he was glad to finally have Lena as his real mom, not just his dad's girlfriend. Lena cried, which made Ellen cry, which made Sarah cry, which made pretty much everyone cry except the men, who all pretended they had allergies. Late in the evening, when most of the guests had gone home and Mason was passed out on the couch inside, Ethan and Lena sat in the workshop-turned-studio, surrounded by her paintings and his furniture. The chair he'd made for himself sat in the corner, next to an easel holding Lena's work in progress. Their lives, merged and mixing, better together than separate. We did it, Lena said. We did. We survived Marcus and lawsuits and fear and all the reasons we should have given up. She leaned against him. And we're here. Married. Actually married. Surprised? Constantly. I keep waiting for it to feel too good to be real, for the other shoe to drop. She paused. But it doesn't. It just keeps being good. Good isn't the same as easy. No, but it's enough. She turned to look at him. You're enough. This life we're building is enough. I don't need perfect. I just need real. Ethan kissed her, his wife, the woman who'd stumbled into his life scared and guarded, and slowly opened up to reveal someone brave and brilliant and worth every risk. The woman who'd taken a chance on a carpenter with a messy past and a 7-year-old son and turned it into a family. What do we do now? She asked. Whatever we want. That's the best part. He stood, pulling her up with him. But first we go inside and rescue whoever's stuck with Mason duty. He's probably trying to convince them to watch his dinosaur documentary again. That documentary is 3 hours long. I know. We should probably hurry. They walked back to the house hand in hand to their son and their life and their future. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. They'd fight and struggle and face hard days ahead, but they'd face them together, and that made all the difference. Behind them, the workshop and studio stood side by side, two spaces for two people who'd found each other against all odds. Who'd chosen love when logic said to run. Who'd built something that would last, not because it was easy, but because they refused to let fear win. Inside the house, Mason was indeed showing the dinosaur documentary to Ben, who looked simultaneously bored and trapped. Ethan and Lena rescued him, said their final goodbyes to the remaining guests, and closed the door on their wedding day. It was late. Mason needed to go to bed. The kitchen was a disaster. Tomorrow there would be cleanup and thank you notes and normal life resuming. But tonight they sat together on the couch, Ethan, Lena, and Mason, and watched the end of the dinosaur documentary because Mason had begged and they were too happy to say no. This was it. The life Ethan had stopped believing he could have. The second chance he'd been too afraid to reach for. The family he'd built from broken pieces and fragile hope and one blind date he'd never wanted to go on. He looked at Lena, who was falling asleep on his shoulder. Looked at Mason, who was fighting to keep his eyes open through sheer determination. Looked around his house, their house, full of evidence that they'd chosen each other and kept choosing each other and would keep choosing each other through whatever came next. It was more than enough. It was everything.